Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
This wave was bigger than all the previous ones. The sea seemed to have created it by the hands of an evil water deity who had molded it from all the previous waves that had hit the ship. Andrew looked at the almost black wall of water mesmerized and no longer thought about whether he would survive this blow of the elements. He couldn't accept his bitter fate at all because it was far away. It seemed, at times, that his relatives were left in another life altogether. His wife, Kate, remained. Actually, for the sake of his wife, Andrew decided to take this adventure. But at first, by the way, it seemed to him that everything would be fine. That this is no adventure, but just an opportunity for a working man to make more money to provide, to support his family. What's wrong with that? But as Andrew now found out, on his own skin in some cases, the consequences can be much more terrible than you can assume or even see in a nightmare. The wave for a moment hovered once more over Kim with the Kemp vessel, as if a predator on the highway before him were prey. Finally, with a crashing and heavy crashing of the sea element came crashing down. Andrew closed his eyes and gripped his hands more tightly to the side. To think of it, until a few hours ago, he had cursed the handcuffs with snot in his wrist from the vicious ship. Now he was even glad. Hoped they would keep the wave from dragging him overboard. By the way his lips moved. "I'll come back to you." And then he was swallowed up by both the water and the cold. Placing a ceramic mold with Armenians' forbidden chicken legs on the table, Kate threw a glance at the whole still life for dinner and smiled contentedly. Just perfect. Everything just the way her husband liked it. Mashed potatoes on the side, sauerkraut, and lots of fried fish. And for dessert, apple pie. A heady aroma floated in the kitchen. Kate took off her apron and carefully straightened it, hanging it on a hook on the wall by the sink. "What's the matter? Is your lover running late?" "No, it's the new car." It demanded the owner's attention, of course, but not enough to miss the first dinner together after he got home. Sighing, Kate decided that she would have to go and get Andrew in person, and perhaps even have a talk with him. Of course, this was probably not the best time to bring up such a difficult, painful topic. Kate's mother insisted that it was better to behave as usual and not to show her illness in any way. Only Kate thought that there should be no secrets from her relatives. And all the more there was no point in pretending that she was all right, that she was the same as she had been before. After all, thought the young woman fumbling with her hands in the closet. If one loves one's other half, then illness is no reason to stop loving, right? I wanted to believe that. So it's better to tell him. Because he's gonna notice how weird she's acting. He's gonna realize something's wrong with her at any moment, and he better be prepared for it. Kate is blind, scooting her hand along the wall in search of the light switch. But despite the flash device, she still couldn't see in the bases where all sorts of little things dropped the keys to the front door. The young woman exhaled through her teeth. How on earth do we let ourselves feel helpless? The accident had happened 2 months ago when Andrew was still on watch. Kate was just coming home from work that day. She was just walking down the path through the yard outside her house when suddenly there was a sharp clap underfoot and then a flash before her eyes and her face burned with pain. An ambulance was called. Unequal passers-by. The doctors said it was a miracle Kate wasn't blinded. But the firecracker, which inexplicably, as it turned out thrown in the yard in mid-March, seriously damaged the retina and lens. And Kate was lucky twice. The first time by chance. The second time with the fact that on the advice of a Maria colleague, their desks were next to each other in the accounting department. She took out health insurance with Stork. Thanks to the insurance, she was treated in a private clinic, underwent a microsurgery and a dozen specific procedures, but still her eyesight returned slowly. Wearing contact lenses was contraindicated, and glasses didn't help much. The doctors said that the body would slowly recover on its own. Probably according to statistics. In the meantime, Kate saw everything as behind the fog and glass. At first, everything was absolutely terrible, but slowly she began to adapt and even return to everyday household chores, which, however, required much more time and care, and help was often needed. For example, Kate was now unable to see how much the kitchen scales were showing. Naturally, she had to take a sick leave from work, but she was lucky with her boss and with the team. The first paid a sudden bonus on a flat spot, the second discounted the money and flooded Kate with offers of various kinds of help. But the only thing Kate really wanted at that time was that none of her friends should blab to her husband. Andrew worked as a construction worker on a shift across half the country. He was a whole specialist and earned a lot of money. And Kate didn't want him to be nervous for her, and even less to go off and come back, breaking the contract. After all, what could have happened to her? She was already recovering. In general, thinking about her near future, Kate could not imagine any other option, except that she was recovering and without any operations. And at night she was sometimes tormented by nightmares, and it was always a dream in which she saw that she was asleep. And when she awakened them, she found that she was completely blind, and at the same time she was being attacked out of the darkness by some monsters from which she now had no chance to escape. Kate didn't know. She just couldn't know that about the same time she had been in trouble, Andrew had been in trouble too, though of a different sort. It was that one of the workers on the site was stealing materials. The customer started an internal investigation, and it turned out that Andrew was under suspicion. The contractor company knew him as an honest, decent man, but hinted boldly that they wanted to break contact with him because they did not want to have in their team a man whose guilt was not proven, but the suspicion was not removed from him at all. Andrew was shocked, offended to the core. He was so offended. He had counted so much on making more money. He had taken a new car on credit before he went on a shift, and he had taken a cash loan in the winter when the whole family went to a sanatorium for New Year's Eve. Repairs in the apartment where my wife and mother-in-law lived made his parents, who lived in the village. Helped again, right? In general, money was needed now, as they say urgently. Andrew was getting sick. He could only imagine how he would show up on his wife's doorstep and waved his hands, saying, "There is no money, and I don't know what we will do now." Andrew didn't drink. 100 years already tried it in a couple of youth. My brother made me try Andrew. I didn't like it, but now all of a sudden he wanted a drink. He went into the first Beliashi and took himself a shot glass and a snack and stood by the plastic table and gloomily looked out the window, where the first spring rain was pouring down. Yes, life can be rattling and tossing. A familiar voice sounded near him. "May I?" The unfamiliar man asked, nodding at the vacant half of Andrew's table. And at that moment, the worker who had lost his seat didn't even think about the fact that it was strange to join him a little when there were still empty historians. Andrew shrugged his shoulders. The stranger also had a ticket to him, not alcohol tea. This stranger looked quite decent. For a while, they were just silent, eating Beliashi. The bastards kicked them out of the place. Andrew couldn't stand it and shared his pain. In the XSI century, I think I will soon go home with a full pocket. And how did it turn out? And he took it all out and told it like it was. That the bastards kicked him out for nothing. They said it wasn't their fault, but they have a reputation. So what do we do now? They said they'd give me my paycheck later. So what do I do? I'm ashamed to ask my former coworkers for a ride home. And to call home. You could die of shame. And how to look your wife in the eye. My mother-in-law would eat it alive. Everyone never liked him. I mean, her daughter could have found a better man. Yes, I sympathize. The stranger shook his head and then held out his hand. "Charles, can we have one for introductions?" Andrew nodded. After the first drink, there was a pleasant warmth in his chest, and his thoughts began to weave together as if they were unraveling a tangled mess. Charles said it happens. Not him first, not him last. But it was his own fault. I should have chosen a firm that is responsible for each worker, that values the worker as if they were members of one big family. Where can I find such a firm? Bitter. Andrew grinned. Yes, you can. Charles looked at him very carefully. Then he said that Andrew could see that he was a good man and that his story had touched him. He himself was such a man who worked honest labor for a penny and did everything to provide for his wife and 4 children. And also a disabled grandmother A dog is also disabled. And then kind people told me that there is a job where you can earn as much in a month as in 3. I bought 2 apartments then, I told in a confidential tone. And the teenager, by the way, did not forget to drink vodka for his wife's fur coat. The whole family vacationed in the Maldives, and then he opened a business. And what? What kind of work is that? Andrew said, "You're kidding, it's not serious." On a fishing boat. And he started talking again. And then all of a sudden, Andrew found himself in front of the contracts. Charles is completely out of the territory, saying there's only 1 vacancy left on the crew. The work is serious. He wanted to give it to an acquaintance, because he is a kind of intermediary, but Vlad sees that Andrew is needed more, so go ahead and sign, man. You'll be at sea in a few days, and you'll get an advance, but I don't have time to think about it. The crew's already formed. Come on. Andrew seemed to be dozing. He almost dropped his pen when he wrote his signature where Andrew showed it. And before that he had answered in the affirmative that he had a passport. He had applied for it to take his wife and mother-in-law to Turkey. It just didn't work out. Grigoriev said that's good. It means that all the documents will be processed very quickly. You look a little woozy. Where are you staying? Said Charles. Andrew named a hotel on the outskirts, where he had rented the cheapest room since he left the construction site. Charles drove him there by car and told him to wake up and sober up, because tomorrow they will go to the office of the company, which owns the ship. They will file the documents, because it is necessary to formalize everything correctly, because the voyage is far away. But Andrew couldn't sleep for a long time. He felt nauseous and was beating himself up. He clicked the remote control of the TV, used to fall asleep to his voice at home. It was showing international news. The slave trade in the modern world had already exceeded the scale of what it was in the ancient world. The presenter of some program was broadcasting the tricks of criminals, who entice their victims into the network of criminal traffic, are becoming more and more original. Andrew didn't finish listening. What else was being said? He was not interested in the tragic problems of the world, because he suddenly felt so lucky. He had met a kind person. He now had a new job, and he had a premonition that now his life would begin to be completely different. Descending from the 4th floor of a 5-story building, Kate stood at the entrance for a few minutes, gathering her courage to go outside, to go out since she had lost her sight. Normal was a little scary. She had been offered, by the way, to borrow a guide dog for a while, but Kate didn't want one. What does it do to her that it might somehow mystically affect her recovery? That she'd sort of recognize herself as disabled and it would stay that way. The only thing she was talked into doing was putting 3 points away. But right now she left it in her room. I can handle it. She said aloud and blinked a lot, though it didn't make her feel much better. Walked along the side of the house. To get to the garages, she had to go around it and down the stairs. She'd make it through and everything would be fine. She would be now. There's her husband, her favorite, back. In fact, they weren't expecting Andrew so soon. In fact, lately it seemed to Kate that there was something wrong with her husband. The thing was that the last time they called, Andrew said that he had some trouble at work, but he wouldn't go into details. They called very rarely. Andrew asked her not to call more often, so he wouldn't miss her even more. But the last time Kate couldn't reach him at all, and she was beginning to worry. But then suddenly her mom came home and her husband with her. Surprise, said Lisa and Kate. Like a little child to whom Santa Claus came, rushed into the hallway, but immediately froze. How would he take her illness? Or maybe Mom had already told him everything. "I've missed you, my love," the man said, and Kate thought his voice sounded like a stranger's. Probably, she decided. He was just in shock at what had happened to her, and she also thought that he didn't seem to know anything about her sick condition yet. That, she thought, was for the best. Andrew. She threw herself around his neck, hugged him, ran her nose into his cheek. Face unpleasant. Stinging, stubble. Of course, my dear husband got so excited that he forgot to shave. And usually he was always clean-shaven. That's enough. You'll have time for a hug. Lisa said sternly. Let the man from the road rest. Yes, of course. Kate lost her eyes from tears. The joy of it protected them burning. And she left hurriedly to her room. I had to use the drops prescribed by the doctor. Her husband and her mother were talking quietly in the hallway. Then Mom came into the room. "Daughter, I need to talk to you." "Yeah, I'll put the tea on," Kate answered. "He'll make it himself. Lisa didn't let her in. We need to have a serious talk. Sit down." It turned out that Lisa had some news about her daughter's husband, and she thought it was her job to deliver it. First of all, she said Andrew was only in town for a couple days and then back. Secondly, Lisa gave her daughter some feminine advice not to be in a hurry to dump her problems on her husband and not to get close to him at all. Because now she is very sick, and it will inevitably affect her. And in general, he will now then perceive her as a sick person who needs care and support, but not a woman. And if they have something in this state, the husband will have specific impressions, and he will cease to perceive her then as necessary. In general, it's better for them to sleep separately for the time being. I told him in the hall pastel joyfully Lisa, "Mommy, but we were Kate at first." But Lisa came at her again with her lecture, and in the end Kate gave in. She was wary of what her husband would perceive of her mutilation, however temporary. Afterwards, the family had dinner. Then the man said he was tired and needed a rest from the road. And Kate cried alone in bed that night. And for some reason it was very, very upsetting. The next morning she woke up with a smile and a stubborn hope for the best. Everything will be fine, for sure. The main thing was to think positively. Getting out of bed, Kate not only washed her face, but also slightly tinted her lips with gloss. Let her not be able to make up as before, because blind a little less than a mole, have accumulated a carcass of female attractiveness herself to add it to her. Then she made breakfast, just cheese sandwiches and coffee. But she cut her own bread from the cheese with a knife and didn't cut it. What's not an accomplishment? Yes, thought Kate. How so? Turns out a lot of things in life. So the little everyday things that we don't lose yet are able to make them taken for granted. Things that are always available as a matter of course. At breakfast, naturally, you wanted to talk more. You just asked Kate for her husband because his voice sounded as strange today as it did before. Hoarse and rough. Yeah, sure. He must really need time, Kate thought. Because Andrew had been sitting beside her normally, but now took a seat closer to her mother-in-law. "I have a doctor's appointment today. Masha promised to pick me up," Kate said. Actually, she was sure that Andrew would offer to drive her in their new car. It would be an excuse to be alone, by the way. No, Kate wasn't attracted to her mother's company. Well, maybe just a little bit. Because sometimes it was very difficult to come to an understanding. But she just really wanted to be alone with her beloved, to explore her fears and doubts. Get his words, tenderness, and support. And I need to visit someone I know. Hastily blurted out the man opposite. All right, snicker. Kate's good mood disappeared, as if a dot ran into the sun. Finished with breakfast, Kate began to pack. Maria had already called her and warned her that she would be pulling up in 5 minutes. "It's great to come visit you," her friend said. When Kate went up to the apartment. "Hey, Andrew," she shouted into the back of the apartment. Andrew went into the far room. "He's not himself to blame," Kate said. "It happens to them men. So let today be our girls' day." Maria was generally a positive person. She and Kate left the apartment together, then from the entrance got into the car carefully. Steps warned Maria at the porch of the clinic. "I'm not blind," muttered Kate, but deep down I was grateful for such reverent support, which I am not. No husband, no mother received. The doctor, after a long examination, reported that the condition of the eyes is improving. But it is important to take medication in a timely manner, and it probably makes sense to think about laser vision correction surgery, which is recommended, among other things, to prevent the development of coma and other eye diseases in years in old age. But this, of course, insurance will not cover, the doctor said. "I'm afraid we don't have that kind of money and won't have it." "Sorry, but we're saving for a mortgage," Kate sighed. "It's your personal choice, of course. But it's my duty to inform you." After the clinic, Maria insisted they stop for coffee and cake. "The premiere was sluggish," laughed Kate, when her best friend said her treat. "With the sick only so," winked Kate. "But you can pay the bill by satisfying my curiosity." So how does Andrew feel about all this? How does he feel about his job? Yeah, we've barely spoken at all since this morning. Kate shrugged. He talks to my mom more. But I believe, that he'll take things more or less normally. Only Kate stammered and sighed and set aside the spoonful of chocolate brownie. He's like a stranger. In what way? It's hard to explain. There's just a different voice coming back, a different smell. You're probably just worried sick, Maria said sympathetically, and Kate agreed. Really, she said, you shouldn't make up things for yourself that aren't there. Here was her beloved husband back home, albeit for a short time, and then he would have to go back. But what should she be sad about today, if just the day before yesterday, it seems, she was ready to give a lot in her life, so that in return there was an opportunity to be with her husband. And now it's here. So should she be so nervous right now? Of course not. Andrew's most vivid memories were of his brother, even though fate tossed them in different directions. Only then, long ago, they were inseparable. They shared the pies their mother gave them, and a slap from father if we were naughty. The blame was always shared equally. Andrew was older, James was younger. But there was only a 45-minute age difference. And they were twins. Parents, not that they didn't care about their boys, but they loved them, of course, and tried to do everything they could to get them out of their lives later. As they would come out of childhood, they succeeded. They studied about the same in school, but then decided to do quite differently. Andrew went to the city to study. He always wanted to be a builder. And James said he was going to travel the world to find his happiness. Andrew then twisted his finger at his temple and sympathized with his brother, because it is necessary to be such a fool and so not serious about his future. But it remained only to wish the younger brother good luck. After graduating from vocational school, Andrew went to work and began to live in a dormitory at a construction concern, and in general lived quite well, and then love burst into his life. He met Catherine, cultured and funny at the same time. In the zoo, she reached through the grate to feed the mess. Girl, feeding the animals is forbidden, Andrew said sternly. Oh, I'm sorry, please, I won't do it again. Quickly bounced off the fence. Beauty in a sundress and budded like milk in color. Now I have to pay the fine, she asked fearfully. No, I forgive you for the first time, said Andrew. Then, unable to stand it, laughed. He didn't admit that he wasn't actually a zookeeper. Kate laughed too and said okay, even so she understood and wouldn't do it again. And then he treated her to cotton candy. And so began their affair. And from the very beginning, Andrew realized that he was not the kind of fiancé to brag about to his girlfriends. Kate was a native citizen with a higher education and her own apartment. But she, by the way, never let him know that they were not equal. But my mother-in-law, yes, she did. It didn't come to a serious conflict. But she could only hint that Andrew came from the village, a simple laborer. His mother-in-law, by the way, had worked in trade all her life and was not a bad woman on the whole. By the way, Andrew paid for the wedding entirely from his own money. He was used to spending the minimum on himself personally, and he was glad that he could please his beloved so much that, and a dress from the boutique, and cake gorgeous, and even fireworks in her honor on the waterfront. They got married a year and a half ago. Andrew's parents could not attend the wedding. Both of them had serious health problems. So he and his young wife went to see them. They really liked Kate. But when they started asking about grandchildren, I had to disappoint them. Andrew and Kate wanted to get their own place first and then have children. In the 6 years since they left, Andrew and Kate had never seen each other from the village. Only sometimes his brother called, but every time he said he needed money. And in principle, Andrew would have been happy to help his brother. But he didn't like the way his brother lived. Always in some stories, he met in cards, he lost money to someone. He supposedly wanted to invest and lost money too. And I think he started drinking. And it turns out that interrupted James' random earnings, lived at his mistress's temporary, and it is unclear how to even exist. Andrew, of course, tried to have a serious talk with him, but nothing worked, and it was bitter and hard for him. So that's how life worked out. Why is it the same? Because their parents raised them? So why do they grow up so different? Andrew, by the way, didn't like to talk about his brother to anyone. Even with Kate, it was just a couple of phrases. Her name is so-and-so, so-and-so, long time no see. He didn't even tell her that he and James were twins, because it seemed that suddenly his beloved then and suspect him of a penchant for a vicious lifestyle. After all, they say everyone, including even scientists and prominent ones, that twins are similar in everything. Precisely about his brother, Andrew remembered the morning when he woke up in his hotel room with his head sitting up. He wondered how James was doing. I wonder what you've gotten yourself into again, or have you gotten your mind right? They'll be in their 30s soon enough. Andrew looked sleepily at the clock. It was 10 o'clock. A big red cockroach was sitting on the corner of the cotton nightstand and moving. It seemed to Andrew that the insect was looking straight into his soul. He forked, waved his hand, the cockroach fled. And then Andrew remembered drinking at the Bialysky, meeting Charles and signing some kind of contract. He'd gotten a new job, it seemed. That Andrew sat up abruptly on the bed, jumped up, and, staggering, grabbed some papers off the table. The fine print. What had he signed yesterday? Andrew leafed through the pages of a job on a fishing boat. Pay of $1,000 a week. Not bad. What are these extra conditions? Fines, penalties, adherence to company policy. Transferability to the contractor's company. What's that about? And why is dispute resolution only possible under the laws of some country he's never even heard of? I think it's an island. What the hell is this? Mumbled Andrew, dreading the bed back. A bad feeling creaked down his spine, chilling his pantyhose. For some reason, he felt like rushing to the airport on the way, asking his coworkers for money. Or looking in the office of any firm that gives out loans, just enough for a ticket and home to his wife. There was a sharp knock on the door, and Andrew jumped. When he opened the door, Charles was there. "Aren't you packed yet?" he asked with a smile that had something predatory in it. Andrew sang it much easier. "But first, you've got to get your paperwork in order. After all, you'll be sailing in land waters as sea hunters. By the way, the Sea Hunter, will be in port for a week. We should all be able to make it in that time. What if I just theoretically changed my mind?" Andrew sighed heavily. Not Brother Charles shook his head. "That's not how things are done. Who was complaining about life yesterday? Did you want to work? Of course, theoretically you could refuse. But then you'd have to pay a fine of $10,000. Andrew nodded nicely. The amount was tough, but it was possible to part with the money for the sake of not going to sea for a few months, for a job with which he was not familiar at all in his life. "Yeah, dummy. What did you think? You're gonna leave the crew short-handed? No, this is serious. Why didn't you read the contract yesterday?" "I didn't." Andrew lowered his gaze, clenched his fingers into fists, so that it wouldn't be noticeable how his hands were trembling. "If it's reliable, you said ironclad. If I'm home in 2 months. All right, let's go." "Let's go," Charles said. And then, when Andrew took his bag with things, went out with him together on the street, and took him first to the firm, which occupied literally one office in some basement on the outskirts of the city, and then to the port to get acquainted with the ship, which bore the loud name Sea Hunter, and in general start to settle down on it slowly. The captain welcomed them warmly. He was not at all against the new man and his crew, because soon enough, he knew this little man would make him a little richer. Kate, I walked to the garages and almost sang with joy. She made it. She's walking without a dog, without a cane. She didn't trip. And anyway, isn't that proof that she's on the mend? I mean, where are the garages needed? She hasn't been here much. It would have been better, of course, if Mom had asked to go get her husband, but Mom was off at the health clinic. For this reason, by the way, Kate measured for the pie, the ingredients not on a scale, but in increments, but everything seemed to be getting through. Kate moved slowly through the garages, a little wary that someone might be walking their dog here without a leash, and she wouldn't notice. She almost twisted her legs a couple of times, stepping into some holes. Andrew called out to Kate as she reached the garage. From there came some sounds, creaks, and suspicious, broad messages. Something it all reminded her of. In fact, she was surprised when her mother suddenly called her, saying that Andrew, he would be in the garage for a while, because the car needed to be looked at. Kate also thought that if it was not driven on it, almost managed to break down. Well, as a man, he probably knows better. Andrew, she said again as she entered the garage. Are you at your wife's? Mom's coming over soon too, and we're all having dinner. I made your favorite there. Kate froze, blinked a lot, but it didn't get any better with her condition. Just what she saw, oh, how could it be possible? She could clearly see the back of her husband's head. He was in the car in the back seat, and he wasn't the only one there. There was another man there, a woman, Sweetly Barrett. The familiar scent of perfume, blondes clean, curly hair. Kate thought she was about to faint. Already shirtless, we noticed her, fidgeting, squeaking, the car door creaking open. Mom exhaled Kate and recoiled. Mom, how could you? Kate felt as if she were being carried up and down, heaven and earth, and was being carried somewhere. The young woman leaned against the wall of the garage and pressed her hand to her chest. Everything in front of her eyes was so smeared, like through a cloudy glass. And with your tears, it's like a veil. Lissa's daughter awkwardly got out of the car, pulling off her dress, holding out her pantyhose. Daughter, did you get it wrong? Kate didn't immediately realize there was a strange, high-pitched sound that occupied her ears. Following her mother's words was her own throaty, hysterical laughter, just really nightmarish. Pride at the same time came out of his mouth. It was a phrase that had a place in vulgar anecdotes about cheating, but in no way in real life. Kate stepped the silhouette of the man whose return she longed for. We need to talk. No, stay away. Kate screamed. Is something wrong? Came the voice of the new actor. David, a neighbor and avid car enthusiast who dreamed of assembling a retro Zhiguli from parts bought individually, peeked into the disgusting scene and into the garage. Oh, said David when he saw everything. Actually, by this point, Lisa and the men had already cleaned themselves up, but they looked shot. So that was a fat hint of something, and yet sitting on the dirty floor, Kate was kind of hinting that there was some family drama going on. Andrew, are you holding out on David? There was doubt in his voice. No, the man said suddenly, and Kate even stopped crying. Would there be an end to this madness? And Andrew continued, the man who had just indulged in passion with her mom. It seemed to Kate that the garage, and the world in general, had suddenly run out of air. She reached for her throat, gagged at sewing a scarf, her fingers, sawing buttons, her coat. Stuffy, continued the man, his brother. What the hell is he even talking about? It was like a hammer had appeared in Kate's head, and they pounded furiously at her consciousness, forcing her to balance on the edge of what seemed to be madness. What brother? Well, yes, Andrew had a brother, but they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He told me. But why did this brother look so much like him? Why was she wrong? Another guess flashed through Kate's brain. Twins, not twins. That's why she was wrong. Why? Why? Why would this brother impersonate her, Andrew? No, she still couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And then David said another phrase. That's what I'm thinking, it can't be. They've fallen out. Andrew, well, the same thing. He's dead. Dead how? Deaf? Kate asked. Because, oh, said David and added immediately with genuine regret. Didn't they call you yet? Didn't tell you? We're phone buddies. We're the first ones on his record. They called me. What about you? I mean, your family, you probably couldn't. If you turned off the phones, or if they were authorized, let's say. He said something else. Those two mothers and Andrew's brother were saying something too. But Kate didn't listen to them anymore. She just fell into the saving darkness, where it was quiet, where there was nothing. She lost consciousness. The first few days of sailing on the Sea Hunter had gone smoothly, except for the fact that Andrew had discovered seasickness out of himself. It's just that up to now, he had only had the opportunity to sail on personal vessels, and in the water open to all sides of the world was much more than riding and moving the ship on the waves. So for the first 24 hours, Andrew lay in the infirmary. Then for another 2 days, he was brought up to speed. Yes, I've got it all figured out, said Andrew, who was even offended that he was not trusted with serious work. A fisherman with 20 years' experience, who was entrusted with training the newcomer, said Benjamin. I will not give a briefing now, and you will be thrown on the rope or fall overboard. And who will be responsible then? So, in principle, it is safe to work here. Carefully, so as not to give away your timidity in front of the formidable sea elements. Asked Andrew. Normal. But there are, of course, cases, shrugged Benjamin. Unfortunate. No, it's rare, said the man and looked at the new guy. It's kind of weird. You just be careful. Okay, careful with what? Well, can you be more specific about what I should be careful of? I don't get it. Mermaids? Andrew grinned. It's better to keep silent about them. Let the scientists prove that they are evolutionarily impossible. But we sailors don't joke about such things. Benjamin wagged his finger. They walked a little farther. They stopped at the side of the boat. Benjamin scratched the back of his head, fastened his jacket and put his hands in his pockets, looking around as if he didn't want anyone to hear them. See, here's the thing. We used to swim normally all the time. Well, there were cases, of course, but injuries are common. It's probably not unheard of at your construction site. But then, in general, we have people from the crew disappearing overboard. Asked Andrew, and even before Benjamin answered again, that familiar feeling of misgiving, like when touched, no. Well, I mean a couple sort of fell overboard. Just been from a neighboring ship that was passing by, didn't notice anything in the water. Port, when they came in from the south, mice disappeared there too, sometimes as far as Indonesia. A lot of rounded eyes. Andrew, well, what can be drunk or out for a walk? Maybe you start to think about things. But now we're in the neighborhood. Andrew shrugged. I gotta get home to my family. Charles told me he's going on a trip for 2 months. I gotta get home to my wife. I miss her. Yeah, but we are not going along the coast. We are going to the Japanese territorial waters. Don't worry, it's all legal. There are official agreements with fishing companies. That's right. Benjamin's words calmed Andrew down a bit, and now he even began to think that everything that had happened was for the best. He would have something to brag about when he returned. Here, they say, even became a sailor. And if it is possible to earn here, as well as Charles promised, then maybe, thought Andrew, he would leave the construction site altogether and become a fisherman. He was about to ask Benjamin about the salary, but he said it was time for lunch, so Andrew went on his way. He was feeling better. The seasickness was receding. He was used to it, I guess. And he could see the near future clear without a storm. But after a while, events took a very different turn. It happened when the Sea Hunter entered the territorial waters of Japan. Andrew had already had a chance to see how huge nets were used to pull out the catch, and even take part in it. The work, of course, was yuck, what a smell and heavy. But he decided that, as a man should, he would bravely hold on. And then one evening there was another ship nearby. A small ship was just passing by and was following the same course. And so when it got dark, Andrew was instructed to go and check the equipment with which the nets went up. He shrugged his shoulders and went to do as he was told. He was not surprised when the captain suddenly joined him on the deck. He thought that the captain was in the ship's cabin with everyone else, and the crew had an extra break in honor of successful fishing. And there everyone was watching some comedy and eating raisin buns. Andrew was freezing on deck and was looking forward to joining the others and getting some rest. Andrew. It occurred to him that the captain must be accompanying him so that as a newcomer he wouldn't make a mistake with anything. Andrew was even touched by such care for the staff. What do they want? Asked Andrew. Because suddenly he noticed on the left side they were standing a boat with several people. It looked like they came from that ship, which was still looming in the distance. Maybe they're in trouble, and they needed help. Andrew turned away from the captain and waved to the people in the boat. And in the next instant he was hit on the back of the head hard, but gently, expertly. Andrew Mayakov's body, heavy at once, muttered the captain, picked Andrew up and threw him over the side. And then Andrew flew down and fell right next to the boat, from which he was grabbed and dragged inside. And then, just as they had come, that is, with the engine turned off, they moved on oars towards the very vessel that had been sailing alongside the Sea Hunter for the last 24 hours. But now these fellow travelers had changed course. They had gotten what they wanted. Kate woke up on the couch in the living room, taking her mother's face away from the vial she was using to bring her to her senses. The children all whispered to Kate and sat up. She was still dizzy. Kate, David was here and he talked to her, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What? What did you say? How could he? How could he die you? Did you mess something up? Daughter, calm down. Let's talk about everything calmly. How could you? Kate waved her mother away, and the latter recoiled, shaking her head. Although Kate couldn't see clearly, she was. Sure enough, her mother hit her lips disapprovingly. Then Kate sighed. She realized that if she gave into panic and hysteria now, she wouldn't be able to figure anything out at all. There's some kind of mistake, she repeated. It's surreal what's going on here. Her husband, his brother, her mother. David, you said Kate first. The neighbor nodded and spoke. It turned out that he'd gotten a call from Japan directly from there, because that was the side that was searching for the missing man from Andrew's fishing boat. What fishing boat? James wondered. My brother was a builder, actually. Well, apparently he decided to retrain. David sighed. You understand, I'm only giving you someone else's words. Anyway, he was on the ship, and then he disappeared. They thought that he fell overboard, accidentally fell off, because he was an inexperienced fisherman. They searched for him, but they didn't find him. The search was called off. It'll be a while before he's declared dead. My husband is not dead, Kate said, and her voice sounded suddenly firm. He couldn't have drowned. No, that's not true. He must be alive, because she stepped with her nose. Of course, one must believe and hope. Things happen in the world, they don't. Can I ask you a question? Are you Brother Andrew? Yes, James said. It's been a long time since we've spoken in person, so I decided to visit, and I came. If Kate had been able to see better, she could have watched the scarlet color flood the cheeks of her mother's neck and even her ears. But only neighbor David saw it. He made some comparisons and assumptions, and he too blushed and smirked meaningfully. What a story, David thought. This James was a young guy and, figuratively speaking, was almost Lisa's son. Yes, he was also an exact copy of her son-in-law, only that James's face seemed rougher. Yeah, he was broader in the shoulders and weighed a bit more. So the twins clearly resembled him. They're ladies in solid years. David now couldn't escape the thought of what he'd seen in the garage. And he swore to himself I wouldn't say a word. It was not enough for Kate and Lisa to realize who had caused the gossip to fly around the house and yard. So David decided to be as dumb as a pharaoh's tomb. About family intrigue, possible love affairs, and about Andrew's disappearance too. David was very soon scrambling to get home. He refused tea and only gave Kate the phone number of the detective from Japan who had called him, and said that this detective had also called her Kate, but said he couldn't get through. Kate sighed as David repeated his words. So she'd had her phone charged this morning, and then she'd gotten wrapped up in the kitchen and forgotten all about it. He added David in French, by the way, but he kind of promised that he could have a translator on the phone if necessary. I learned English in college. They sent me, starting with my parents. They thought maybe I'd become a big man. But I smiled at David. To the factory to make ice cream. Went to this is also a good thing, right? All right, I sighed. I've got you all caught up in my personal stuff, sorry. And again, sympathy, hang in there. Well, I went, and David left. James' mom told Kate we need to have a serious talk. What's the grief? Lisa shook her hands. I just don't know what to do. Should I make some tea? Does it help your nerves? No, Mom, we'll talk about everything. We'll talk about it right now. Kate didn't see. She could look, and she looked angry, resentful, and determined. Not just like that. Right now, Kate was determined. And she also had a strong, barely surmountable urge to knock Sergius over the head with something, but she didn't do it. And not so much out of the goodness of her character in general, as because of the fact that this man looked so much like her husband. Andrew sat in the corner of the Triumph and felt nauseous. Seasickness had returned, whether the captain had accidentally given him a concussion. Either it was the stinky, salty fish, and not the cleanest water they'd stocked it with. It didn't take long to figure out what had happened to him. When Andrew woke up on that small nameless ship, it was clearly explained to him that now he was a prisoner for the whole world. But he was also a valuable man at the same time, and literally valuable, because the captain had been paid 4,000 American dollars in cash for him. And now he would work off that money. But first he'll be sold again, and maybe again. How's it gonna go? Come on, man. How can you sell a live human being? Like cattle? What kind of livestock? Andrew then even thought it was some kind of crazy joke. But that last straw of hope cracked a moment later when he realized no, it was the whole truth. Then Andrew was beaten for the first time and told not to ask any more idiotic questions and not to talk at all. The slave traders themselves had spoken to him, by the way, in a wild mixture of English and Russian. And then, Andrew at first was terribly pleased when he realized that he was with him on this trial. The name of which, by the way, he never learned. Benjamin is here. What an idiot. I said Benjamin, who, by the way, also got hurt when they were alone. They were locked in the hold. I suspected something was going on. I should have told someone sooner who'd listen. It turned out that Benjamin, who'd been having trouble with us missing crew members under suspicious circumstances, decided to break into the captain's cabin. See if there's anything there. Captain caught him doing it. A fight ensued. The captain got the upper hand, and although he didn't intend to do it, he threw Benjamin off, so to speak, as a compliment to Andrew. What do you mean? Asked Andrew. Gritting his teeth from the cold, he was still in his wet clothes. We're really in bondage now. It's no good getting one of these. We got to get out, so when we get into port, who's nice to you? Did the man say we're even going into port? Benjamin grinned bitterly and began his story. Andrew listened with dazed eyes. It turned out that Benjamin was a very well-informed man about all the dark things in the world. He told that fishing in the seas and oceans of the world is often done illegally, and they make as much money on this scale as on trade in other illegal things. And to keep costs down, and to keep anyone from blabbing, slave labor is often used. Now we can only wonder, where will we end up? Argentina or closer to India in Southeast Asia? What are you telling me? In a colorless voice, Andrew said, No, I don't agree. We need to save ourselves, we can swim. He suggested, the first option that comes to mind is what style of swim. Ellen, I hope that dolphins swim by as a cab catch and grab his fin. Or are you planning to steal a lifeboat? I thought you told me you couldn't swim. I don't know how to swim, Andrew sighed, and thought that he would give anything to be on solid ground. We have to save ourselves, but don't be stupid. It is also necessary to break smart people has. Trust me, the sea is deep and full of hungry fish. I think we should lay low for now. Benjamin thought Andrew was a good man, but he didn't share something important with him, namely the fact that he had sent a couple of messages to his friends and acquaintances before he went to the captain's house, sending word, so to speak, that they could start unraveling the damn thing, and send it all to Benjamin over an encrypted internet connection. So no matter how much the captain digs through his phone, he can't find it. So Benjamin decided to keep quiet for now. Not that he didn't trust Andrew, but he didn't know how things would turn out. And he didn't want him, for example, to blurt it out by accident or under pressure, and thus finally abruptly turn them both into the worst of all possible scenarios. Over the next few days or weeks, Andrew lost track of time altogether. The Russian prisoners were thrown from ship to ship several times. The ships did not enter any ports, and the captives were not told where they were going. But because it was getting warmer and the seascape was changing, as well as listening to the speeches of the ship's crews, it was possible to conclude that they were moving somewhere in a southerly direction and closer to Southeast Asia. The final destination for Andrew and Benjamin was eventually a fishing boat. Keller was fishing illegally in the Indian Ocean. And they weren't the only metalworkers there. There were nearly a dozen others, mostly from India. But there was also one Australian, even one who had been sold into slavery, as well as their own who had agreed to long labor because his family owed the local gangsters. Most of the forced laborers were here for a short time, no more than 3 years. But one kid from Bangladesh, whom everyone called Jim for some reason, explained that he had been here for 7 years. Benjamin, as a man who knows English better, translated Jim's story to Andrew, and it was quite banal. He got married, he and his beloved were expecting a child, and he went to work. And then in a coastal village, in a bar, a stranger came up to him and said that there was a topic. "There's a way to make a quick buck. I cannot hear for years," Andrew said then. And he no longer cared that he was a man, and he had tears in his eyes. "I have a mother and father to see. I have a wife to love. I have to go back." They worked their asses off, not eating rice and the smallest fish they could catch. Andrew had run dozens of rescue scenarios in his head over the weeks, both for himself and for everyone. Then he looked again at the armed crew. 6 men, all strong, not exhausted by starvation and grueling labor guys, and realized they had no chance. And then one day, Andrew did a rash thing. All he did was go to ask for medicine for Jim. Poor guy hurt his hand on some spiny fish in the vaporizer. Kid's got a fever, and he's delirious. The captain went to see to his slaves. And when in the morning everyone went back to work, Jim was not among them. Andrew was startled. He suddenly realized that by his care he had brought danger upon the lad. If he had not called the attention of the main man on that dreadful ship, the lad might have been different himself, especially since Jim had said that this sort of thing had happened to him before. Now here was Andrew feeling terribly guilty. But that wasn't the only thing. A swelling of feelings. Asshole. Andrew went to the captain. "What did you do to him?" The other sailor slaves tried to stop him. But Andrew, driven by a just thirst for revenge, managed to smear the captain and, it seems, broke his nose. He had no doubt that Jim had been thrown overboard. "Captain," when Andrew was dragged away from him, the big man stared in amazement, and then angrily, laughing, said that nothing Andrew would soon learn to behave, and handcuffed him to the board, forbade to give him food and water. The scorching sun, under which Andrew spent the whole day, seemed to bring unbearable torment. But in the evening, as the storm played out on the sea, Andrew realized that it could be even worse. It seemed incredible how the water in these warm lands could be such an icy storm. Kate moved his lips. "I'll come back to you." And then the impact of the waves simply sealed him to the side, and Andrew lost consciousness. Lissa hadn't gotten to her daughter. It just didn't make sense now. And she said frankly, and even with a challenge in her voice, that she and James were lovers. "What did you want?" She threw to her daughter. "I'm not an old woman yet. At my age, by the way, the second youth begins. It's not like I've made an attempt on your husband. So don't get hysterical with me. But why did you have to lie? Why didn't you just say he was Andrew's brother? Why all the mystery of Kate's mom? I'm so sorry. What's the point of dredging up the past now?" The past was literally yesterday and today. Kate knew well this technique when her mother began to apologize obviously for the sake of appearances, and just increases the subjects of serious conversation, insisted that life should continue as before and without discussing what happened. "Lissa, don't worry, it's bad for your heart," interrupted the preparers. What else is there to say to women, James? And it sounded so sweet and caring that Kate didn't know how to react. Laugh or spit. She was just in shock at her mother. It all started a long time ago. James began his story. He had left his brother and gone to the big city to get his hopes up. That money would fall from the sky. He, of course, did not expect and realized will have to how to spin to rise. At first, James got a job as a laborer at the market, but the pay was not fat, and also had to spend on a room, which was rented in the company of the same laborers on the outskirts of the Granny Lonely. After a couple of weeks, I started having backaches. And then, when James pulled his shoulder and couldn't go to work, he realized the dire situation he was in. Something had to change, and the opportunity presented itself suddenly. James then went to the store, as always, to buy the cheapest on offer. At the crossroads, he saw a girl coming out of another store. The pretty girl was all hung with paper bags with loud brand names. She got on a bus with a driver and drove off. And then James had a second realization. He would never have a normal, beautiful, easy life. if he keeps floundering like he's been floundering, not like the universe itself was sending him one sign after another. James saw the flags on the pavement, similar to the one that beauty had dropped on him, and it said about a new show program in a famous nightclub. And then it hit James exactly. He remembered how in his youth, when he and his brother went to the village disco, when there was a scuffle, he always managed to dashingly restore order there. No, James himself knew how to fight, but he also knew how to calm down the rowdy ones like Czechs, who'd had too much to drink or who were just out of character. So he went straight to the nightclub. And there it was. Coincidence needed just such a man, only unusual bouncer. The administrator told him. A blonde in her 40s with a gorgeous shape. We need someone who knows how to handle problems delicately. We value our reputation. I agree to everything. Lusciously, sweetly stretched the administrator and undid the button on a silk blouse. Well then, let me then you from the conversation. True, specifically this moment with a piquant hint James in his story missed. He simply told Kate that he was hired in a nightclub as a security guard, and he worked there successfully. But then another man was hired. It just happened. A misunderstanding happened. James again, he left out one thing. Because in fact, he was trying to get acquainted with one guest of the club, not paying attention to the fact that she had a ring on her finger. Then an angry husband came along. So James lost his job. And as the cherry on the cake, he was barred from any other decent similar establishments in the city. But James was lucky. During his time at the club, he made a lot of useful acquaintances. And he was not literally left on the street. He was helped to get a job as a salesman in an expensive store, and there he worked for almost 2 years. True, as he is guilty, he recognized that he never managed to save money. So he lived literally from paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes he tried to enter some business, or rather, in a quick win-win investment, but as each time he ran into fraud. And then James was diagnosed with a disease, not one that was incurable. But there were heart problems and needed to be treated, and the main thing was not to overload at work. My brother must have said we weren't very lotta. James grinned bitterly. Kate nodded. Yes, Andrew usually referred to his brother with the obligatory adjective. Fool, dumbass, stupid, or something like that. Except we're not strangers. People were socializing, James continued. And now, it seemed, he was beginning to get to a particular part of his story that he was particularly uncomfortable telling. He complained to me not long ago that you two were fighting. Kate nodded again. Yes, that was true. There had been disagreements in the family and above all over Andrew's working shifts. Kate insisted that her husband should be home, that she didn't like him being away so long. Andrew reasoned that he would earn more there and accordingly. They are more likely to take an apartment in the mortgage and in general. He's doing it for her. And if it's for my sake, then I need you around. Kate was almost crying at times like this. And right now she had no rest that in the last wave, when Andrew talked with Andrew, they communicated dryly, hardly as can communicate loving spouses, forced separation. But I made up my mind, too, James said, and fell silent. To what? Well, talk, I don't get it anymore, Kate. I thought I might seduce you. I apologize. Wait a minute, Hanaka. Tell it like it is. What do you mean, seduce? And what does that have to do with my mom? How are you two doing? If you let me go on, I'll tell you everything. James muttered. Kate gave him that opportunity, and he continued. James decided that his resemblance to Andrew could be terribly useful. That Kate might be tempted by that very resemblance. But James had Kate all to himself. Yes, long ago on the eve of the wedding, to which James could not come, and so just called and verbally congratulated his young wife. And so James took the same number and sent a message saying, so and so. I'm your husband's brother. We haven't talked in a while. We're in the family way. How are you doing? He also added that he had heard rumors through his brother that he and Kate were fighting. And James assured her that he was personally on her side. Andrew, he's a fool for not appreciating what a treasure he has in his wife. And James included a picture of himself with the message. He's all handsome at the gym. But it so happened that at the time when the message came, this Kate forgot his phone at home, and his mom accidentally read it. At first, she was very surprised that her son-in-law, it turns out, has such a brother. And then, well, that's where Lisa came into the conversation. You know, she said, dimming her gaze, I've been trying to get my life together for a long time. I've been on dating sites. I've tried dating people my own age, and nothing works. Then some grandfathers write, then just fools scare me. And here I sent him Seriosha a quick message that say, do not need to this number to communicate with us, that no one recognized unnecessary. Right, let's go to another one. I didn't tell him this number. So Lisa waved her hands. James thought he was talking to you. It turned out that Lisa was immediately attracted to James and pretended to care about him. Wait, now why would you want to seduce me? Is this some kind of original way to get back at your brother? Did Kate interrupt the story? No, that's not what I was hoping for. And he confessed. When he announced his plan, Kate was shocked, although it seemed like a lot more than that. It turned out that James was counting on Kate falling in love with him. After all, he looks exactly like his brother. Well, in content, so to speak, he could be, unlike Andrew, the man of dreams. James, fame, the elements, and dozens, hundreds of compliments. He planned that Kate would divorce Andrew, and then he, taking his brother's place, would move into her apartment and get a residence permit. And then he could get a job at the firm where Kate had such great connections. What connections? Exclaimed the girl who could not understand anything at all. You see, the mother explained. I wanted to keep James interested, to keep him interested. And I told him that your boss was your lover, and out of old friendship, so to speak, would hire James even without a college degree. William, Kate gasped. Here now in any framework, even the wildest fantasies did not fit. Because William was 62 years old, happily married for over 30 years, and was generally the sweetest, most down-to-earth, and kindest man. How could you do that? Kate, feeling resentful for having insulted William to a degree hardly greater than that her mother had even contrived such a sordid affair involving her. So I decided to come home from work, and they fired me, pinned the shortfall on me, and I didn't steal, James said. Well, we'll take our word for it. Kate grinned grimly. I said I'd be there, James continued, letting her words sink in. And then your mom showed up. She confessed everything, told me that I wasn't really texting her with you. It was like a joy the whole time. And how are you? You're fine, yeah. But why? Why you? She pointed her finger at the guy and you. She pointed her finger at the mother. Why the whole circus with him, Andrew? What were you trying to accomplish? Answer me, and stop lying to me. Lisa, the mumbling was about how Katya shouldn't be nervous. But then, when she barked at her menacingly again, she just took it upon herself to explain. She said she was fine with it. After all, it was well known that Kate couldn't stand strangers in the house. Lisa thought that she might not want to have James as a guest, since Andrew had spoken so negatively about him. And this is where Lisa decided to use the fact that her daughter has vision problems. She decided it wouldn't be a bad idea for James to hook up with Andrew for a couple days. And then she'd get the guy an apartment, and he'd move out. And then what? It seemed to Kate more and more that this unreal life was going on around her, that she was in a bad movie, which had an incomprehensible madman screenwriter. And it would be nice, by the way, to remember to prescribe a happy ending. What you would have said when Andrew came back, I would have thought about it. Lisa sighed. I just wanted to do something about it now. Daughter, can't you understand me a little? I'm just not an old woman. I want love too. Kate chuckled. Yes, Mom was partly right. For her age, Lisa had an amazing figure. She was slender, lush in all the right places. She moved easily and even gracefully, could dress tastefully, and didn't overuse decorative cosmetics. And in fact, before the whole ugly story was revealed, Kate, it was even pleasant when acquaintances or casual passers-by complimented her mother. She was just happy for her mother that she had retained her charm at such an age. Except now she couldn't admire it anymore for some reason. That's just great. Yeah, I'm Kate exclaimed again. Yeah, my heart almost stopped. When I saw you guys, Mom and you. She turned to James. I guess Andrew was always talking about you for a reason. Is that how much you need the money? You destroy your own brother's family for it, and then have an affair with his mother-in-law. I realize I deserve the worst words, but you haven't lived my life, and you can't know what I'm thinking and feeling. And I don't want to know, and I'm not going to get into it. Kate jumped up off the couch. Now get out of my house. Kate, this is my house too, and James isn't going anywhere. Besides, how can you be so cruel? Lissa's voice trembled. He just lost his brother. Andrew's not dead. He's alive. There's something wrong. It's impossible. There's some kind of mistake. And I know it. When Andrew woke up, he thought he'd probably drowned and gone to the other side. Otherwise, why is it so bright? What's blinding his eyes? Softly lying down, nothing hurt. But as consciousness cleared, everything became clearer. The light was hitting his eyes from the lamp hanging from the ceiling, lying softly on the clean bed, and nothing hurt, because he had been injected with a horse dose of anesthetic antibiotics and all sorts of other drugs. He was informed about it by the doctor, who, as it turned out, came every now and then to visit the patient, to check how he was doing. Naturally, Andrew had a lot of questions, and if he could only speak normally, he would have pelted the doctor with them. But his voice wouldn't listen. It was explained to him that it was from shock, because he had indeed almost drowned. But it would soon pass, and the doctor, as if he had read his mind, immediately satisfied his curiosity by telling him what had happened. It turned out that he was incredibly lucky, because the night before, when the ship was caught in a storm, two things happened at once. First of all, the very boy named Jim, about whom Andrew thought he was dead, survived. He was picked up by a cruise liner that happened to be sailing in the same waters. And Jim, of course, immediately told of his troubles. The crew of the liner rushed to contact the authorities. Secondly, at about the same time, the friends Benjamin had contacted before he joined Andrew finally began to act. The thing was that Benjamin had sent messages to several of his friends, but something happened with the internet connection, and his message was finally received by only one person, who coincidentally was in India at the time. And everything spiraled in the sense that Benjamin managed to send not a simple message saying, "I'm in trouble. Help me, help me." But he also managed to send some important documentary evidence, confirming the fact that the captain of the Sea Hunter for several years not only fished, but also sold people into slavery. Neatly, their disappearance on the theory that the fishermen could have simply fallen overboard or escaped to the port of some warm country to stay there illegally. And so it all turned out that this very acquaintance Benjamin further managed to raise the right people, to involve some organizations. Plus Jim's testimony added to the mix. And when one thing added up to another, it just so happened that it became clear on which particular ship Benjamin and Andrew were being held captive. Then Kelly was chased, interrupted by the storm. Kelly was caught, barely behind him. And the storm, by the way, even helped, because the pirate, in fact, a fishing vessel, turned out to be badly battered and could not develop much speed to evade the chase. Finally, the ship was arrested, as was its crew, and the captives were released. All of them required medical attention to one degree or another. But Andrew was hurt more than anyone else. The doctor said that Andrew would probably stay in the hospital for a month, and then he would have to stay in a foreign country because his testimony, as well as the testimony of other prisoners, is extremely important in order to bring the villains to the deserved responsibility. "I cannot so long, weakly and resolutely at the same time," said Andrew. "Doctor, I'm asking you, purely as a human being, is there any way to speed things up with these depositions? And will you write me up as soon as possible under my responsibility without claims or whatever it is supposed to be? I have to see my wife." The doctor looked at the man in surprise. This man had been through something almost unbelievable. But why can't he just lie down now, recover his strength? Why is he so eager to fly away as soon as possible? Perhaps, thought the doctor, this man loves his family very much. All right then, I'll see what I can do in your case. For a week at least, we'll support you. In the meantime, is there anyone you'd like to call? Yeah, I want to call my wife and my parents. Tell them I'm okay. They'd probably lost me by now. The long conversation bored Andrew, and he leaned back impotently on the pillow. When the doctor left, a nurse soon came in, bringing food and medicine. And a telephone, and Andrew dialed the first number. First, he called his parents. The lovingly prepared dinner had gone largely untouched that day. Kate had gone to her room immediately after talking to her mother and James. How she wished that it all turned out to be just a nightmare, and that when she woke up, everything was fine. And Andriusha, the man she loved, would be alive and well. Must be from a strong nervous excitement. Kate fell asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow, but woke up unexpectedly early for herself. At 5:00 a.m., she glanced at her phone. What time was it? And noticed the missed call icon. Her heart skipped a beat. A strange premonition prickled in her chest, as if something disturbing had happened, and yet she was soon to receive good news. Kate remembered that David had told the neighbor that some foreign services were investigating Andriusha's accidental disappearance on the open sea, and that they promised to call back when they had some details. So maybe they were the ones who called. No, Kate realized she wouldn't bring herself to dial the unknown number because she was afraid of hearing the worst, that Andrew had been found and that he was dead. But she didn't have to do that, because the phone rang again. Translating the subject into the air through clenched teeth, Kate pressed the button to accept the call. But not a word was spoken, and she almost screamed when she heard her husband's voice on the other side. Beloved at last, and once again she found her voice. Andrew, are you alive? Where are you? What happened? You're all right. The wife was flooded with questions. What could Andrew answer her? He realized that it was impossible to tell the whole truth, because he didn't want to alarm Kate. And the mother-in-law scares with her adventures, even if they have already ended, as it was not desirable. Only after the first phrases she said, Andrew realized that there was no point in hiding. He hurried to assure Kate that now everything was fine with him, that he was in no danger now. No, you don't have to come to me. Don't worry, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. I'm being treated here. It's a nice room. You can see the palm trees from the window. Kate added he feels like he's going to cry a little more. I'll get back on my feet, and I promise to go to the sea. I will definitely do everything to make you live happily at my place. I don't want to go to the sea. Through tears of joy, answered Kate, just come home soon. And then it happened accidentally that she let it slip that she was ill. Andrew, of course, got very excited. After all, the eyes, as he said, are not some shoulder bones in which necessarily grow. It's much more complicated than that. Kate, for her part, assured Andrew that she was feeling better. Then she told him that James was staying with them. But of course, Kate wouldn't reveal the specifics of his visit. At first, she simply said your brother was visiting. Andrew said that was very good, because it was high time they saw each other. After this conversation, Andrew began to rush the doctor, even more so that he would be discharged as soon as possible. Also, as soon as he could stand up and walk, Andrew demanded to see Benjamin. Thank you, Andrew said. For what? Benjamin asked. Yes, for being there for me the whole time, keeping me going. Without you, I wouldn't have lasted. You're the strong one. By the way, what are you going to do next? Home to your people? Said Andrew. And of course, no matter how much they pay, I won't go on shifts. I'll find a job near home. That's the only way now. What do you think you'll do? I'm going home too. I've got a mother, nephews, sister. I've got to get out of here too. I'll work on the river. Maybe I'll give rides to tourists or fix boats. Well, by the way, come visit me sometime. Our Volga is beautiful. No Maldives can compare. I will, nodded Andrew. They talked some more. And then Benjamin said that the Charles that Andrew had so predatorily recruited, that he too had already been captured, had caught up with him in London, when the plane had just landed. All in all, it looked like Benjamin and Andrew were the latest victims of one large, wide-ranging network of a human trafficking criminal organization. Only I want to go on living my life in peace, Andrew said. In the sense that no journalists, no interviews. Benjamin agreed with him and recommended to ignore all such offers. That way everyone would get off his back quicker. Finally, after a few days, Andrew was able to go to the airport. He still felt weak and unimportant. But what did it matter that he was coming home and at home? I think, in the meantime, a very important question was being decided. And the thing was, Kate thought that James should confess to his brother his not beautiful yes, something about his nightmarish act. He'd forgive you. They're family. She repeated stubbornly. You may be married, but you don't know Andrew very well, James replied grimly. No, he's sorry, but he'll remember it for the rest of his life. Daughter, do you have any idea what would happen if he found out? Lissa was really worried. Do you think you can just forget it and pretend it never happened and go on living as before? No, of course not, but at least for a while. How much has happened? Do you need to have a quiet talk? Not in a hurry. We need to come to an understanding. We're not strangers. Kate had to agree. Not so much because she understood her mother as because she didn't want to disturb Andrew, who, of course, needed a quiet atmosphere after what had happened. David's neighbor was a good man. He kept his promise about not blabbing to anyone or anything. He could not, as a result of which very soon all acquaintances and neighbors, not to mention relatives, were aware that Andrew had decided to become a sailor and fisherman for some reason. And at first, these people went to Kate's house to express their condolences. And then they were quite shocked by the news that Andrew was alive and back home. And besides, Andrew took and told briefly about what had happened to him to the same Dmitri. And he, of course, spread it everywhere and to everyone. So Andrew soon got all the attention he feared. Thankfully, at least without journalists, but all acquaintances now as if it was their duty to ask him about what had happened. And this story slowly became in people's retellings more and more new details, and often fictitious. And in its, so to speak, final version, it presented the story of how Andrew alone confronted in the sea mafia and powerful clan of a pack of sharks. Dovskum in the story somehow managed to appear sultry beauty Italian, the daughter of the Italian head of the mafia, which Andrew tempted millions and her charms, but he refused her for the legitimate wife. And in the end, Andrew, from all these gossip and rumors, on which it was almost possible to shoot a movie, he was so tired of them that I was thinking of even starting to move to another city. But then in the environment of acquaintances, friends, and relatives happened a new event. Someone cheated on someone had a child out of wedlock. And very soon, Andrew's story receded into the background. We could breathe easy. Well, it seemed that way. And then Kate just realized at one point that she couldn't lie to her husband anymore. Even if the lie required not talking, but just keeping her mouth shut. But she couldn't hide anymore. And one day, when Mom and James weren't home, she told Andrew everything. And Andrew, of course, was shocked. But after everything he'd been through, he had a different outlook on life. And although now he realized the baseness of his brother's deed, he also realized that it was nothing compared to what he had experienced. "Why are you so calm?" asked concerned Kate, who generally already showed that her husband had fallen into a kind of trance of thoughtfulness. "I'm restless," Andrew answered honestly. "Only I won't do anything at all, in the sense that I don't want to quarrel with my brother. He's certainly shown his intelligence and morals. But you know, after all this, I think I'll just talk to him and explain that, unfortunately, he doesn't belong in our house. Except it's also my mom's house." Kate said shyly, "You're right, but I thought let's eat. But where to? We don't have enough for a mortgage yet. You still have to find a stable job to get it approved. I know all that, but at least we can afford a rented place. What do you say?" Kate was very happy to hear that. And just 3 days later, they moved into an apartment found through a realtor they knew. "Maybe I should stay home?" asked Andrew excitedly to his wife. He had a job interview scheduled for 3 days today. Kate had not been feeling well since morning. Perhaps she told her husband ate, and at breakfast the yogurt was not of good quality by any means. "Make sure you come with me. Everything will be fine, I promise." It was only when the door closed behind her husband that Kate stopped smiling and hurried through the hole on Thu 100 to the bathroom. And it was necessary to finally test her suspicions. With trembling hands, the young woman pulled out a pregnancy test from under a stack of towels. Andrew hadn't really expected to get the job. It was about the position of foreman in a solid organization, engaged in the design and construction of cottages and summer houses. In terms of the basic requirements, Andrew seemed to be suitable for this position, but still going into the office for an interview was not to the end. I'm sure he answered the standard questions. "So why do you want to work for us?" asked a young blonde who held the position of head of the personnel department. Seems, judging by her last name, she was related to the owner of the entire company. "I have a family to support," Andrew answered honestly, "and I'd like to gain experience. One day I'd like to build a house for my wife and kids myself. That is, I realize that I will not be able to handle everything myself, for example, the foundation. But everything that is possible, I would like to do with my own hands. So I need to gain all kinds of experience. And it seems that this is exactly what your company can help with." The blonde was satisfied with this answer. And she, to Andrew's pleasant surprise, informed him that no, he would not have to wait for the call. It had already been accepted. Andrew did not go home, but flew. But on the way, he did not forget about something important. He stopped by the flower store for a bouquet for his beloved, and also in the confectionery for a set of exquisite cakes. They had something to celebrate today, but there was a surprise waiting for him at home, or rather 2 surprises. Lisa called her daughter in the moments when she was barely recovering from the results of the pregnancy test. "Yes, Mom, this is an emergency," Kate said. "I'm just a little busy right now." "Lisa, too, moratorium on what?" "It's very urgent," and sobbing. "I told you what happened. Since the daughter and son-in-law left, Lisa has been living in an apartment with James. Yeah, they were starting to live as a couple, and she didn't care what anyone said. And of course, they had something to say about their age difference and the fact that James was Lisa's brother and twin brother-in-law. But she didn't care. She felt airy happy. A second youth had come to her. Lisa also spoiled James. She updated his closet, gave him a cell phone, and then emptied both of his accounts, where she'd been saving money just in case. She supported her lover, closed his loan, plus gave him money for nothing, because James told everything. Just all ears were buzzing about some mega-profitable investment project. In general, the life of an unusual couple was booming. Lisa even began to think about the marriage ceremony and even thought about what she would like a dress that was not pure white. Of course, it would not correspond to her age. Well, maybe a shade of ivory. "Mom, you called me to tell me how you 2 sweethearts are doing." "Life is good. Let me just say I'm happy for you and we'll call it a day." "Okay, after all, I'd probably be the wrong daughter to wish you and James apart. But I can't wish for your marital happiness either." The daughter broke down on the other side sobbing. "Lisa, so James left me. Turns out the newlywed and 5 minutes away." Fiancé literally disappeared from Lisa's life. Just when she got home one day, she didn't find him there. But she did find a touching note saying that he, James, was immensely grateful to Lisa for everything she had done for him, that she had left a lifelong memory in his heart. But he, alas and is not yet ready for a serious relationship because he needs to find himself in this big world. In this regard, James asked him to forgive him if he had offended him in any way. He wished his sweetheart a Lezginka of all the best, including love, and went somewhere else. By the way, James took all her gifts, including a new watch, an expensive smartphone from a famous brand, the latest model, and of course, a substantial amount of cash. "Ah, Mom." Kate sat up like that. Hearing all this, "I'm so sorry." She was crystal sincere. She really felt sorry for her mom, who seemed to have a crush on her. They talked some more. Lisa said that no, she wasn't angry with James, and she realized that she had brought it on herself. It was her own fault for believing that their love could be real. Mom said to Kate, "I need to tell you something too. I'm pregnant." Andrew, the same news found out, barely crossed the threshold. At first he was taken aback, but then he laughed, picked up his beloved in his arms, spun around the apartment, and putting her in her place, demanded Kate. And Andrew did so. "And now I will always fulfill all your wishes with tenderness," he said. Such an important change in the life of their little family soon had serious consequences. Plus, they had to take into account what had happened in Kate's mom's life. And first of all, the couple made a decision. to return to the old apartment, especially since the mother-in-law was calling. Thus, they could solidly save on housing, which of course, against the background of a soon addition to the family, was not at all superfluous. Naturally, the family reunion was accompanied by some awkwardness. But slowly Lisa began to communicate with her daughter and son-in-law almost as before, only with the amendment that now she spoke to Andrew much more gently and did not express her dislike for him. "Mother, where do you enjoy yourself so much?" Kate asked once. "Yes," so smiled embarrassed Lisa. She was standing at the mirror, adjusting a silk scarf around her neck. "Did the Cavalier declare himself, or what?" Kate jokingly inquired. "Maybe the boyfriend is at least 20 years old and has a daughter, but you'll remember Tommy for a long time." She wasn't really offended, though. And in fact, now, looking back, Lisa realized that while she had been blinded by the crush, she had been blinded by it. James, with whom had been clear from the beginning that nothing could work out. But now it was different. Right now, Lisa was on her way to meet an old acquaintance of hers, Eugene. He was her age, and they had been in the local flower club together for a long time. "Daughter, we need to talk." Lisa couldn't stand it any longer because she couldn't keep such important information to herself. The fact was that now, 6 months into the relationship, it had already become clear that she and Eugene were serious. His children were long grown up and lived far away. He lived alone in his large apartment, and now Kate's mom was thinking about moving in with him, as well as making the relationship with this man official, especially since both had been his original idea. "You've told your daughter about all of this now. I understand if you say I'm not getting serious again." She's got her head down. "Only I think it's serious and real now. You see, I want daughters too." Kate's mom gave her a big hug. "I didn't mean that at all. On the contrary, even I think you are doing the right thing, and I think you will be very happy yet." At the due date, Kate gave birth to a child. It was a girl, and they decided to name her Valerie. People around her said that her eyes were all daddy's, and her nose was exactly like her mom's. Andrew, by this time, had already managed to get a good foothold at work, and he and Kate decided that, perhaps, will not take an apartment in the mortgage in the city, and better buy a plot of land in the suburbs and start there slowly build a house. This option seemed much more attractive to my husband and wife, also because they could more comfortably arrange the life of Andrew's parents near them. He was a very late child, so they were already elderly people, and it was certainly better for them not to live alone further on. Doctors, by the way, were frightened by the fact that pregnancy and childbirth could negatively affect Kate's eyesight. But contrary to their gloomy expectations, her eyes fully recovered by the end of the pregnancy. And when the baby girl came into the world, Kate could admire her with clarity from the climate. And in those moments, it was so easy for her to feel happier than this woman in the world. And then a few months later, James called unexpectedly, and Andrew's first reaction was predictable. Before answering the call, he cursed out loud at his brother because he had decided that the money he had received from Lisa had certainly managed to skip out on his money and had gotten into something else. He would ask for financial help, but it wasn't like that at all. James told me timidly that he had actually sort of gotten smart. He decided to settle down in a small town. He went to study auto mechanics and even got a job at a car service. But most importantly, he met a girl and fell in love. They got married. Her name was Wendy, and she was a single mom. But James wasn't afraid of that because he thought it was true love. "Well, let's hope things work out for him," Andrew said. When they finished talking, "Do you think so?" Kate asked him. "Why wouldn't I?" she shrugged. "After all, we're twins, and if they didn't get a little bit of his carelessness, then a little bit of my cleverness must have fallen to him." As time went on, the whole story of Andrew's crazy adventures, not that it began to be forgotten, but he himself and Kate began to return to it in conversation and thought less and less often. However, it suddenly had an unexpected sequel. Just one day, they were contacted by a lawyer who represented the interests of a foreign company that was engaged in processing fish, making various canned products from it. It turned out that this company for many years, without knowing it, had been buying illegally harvested fish. That is, poachers, and even with the use of slave labor. And naturally, when the truth came out, it was a serious blow to their reputation. To save it, the company donated a generous amount of money to environmental protection funds, promised to make better sourcing choices from now on, and also decided to pay some very substantial sums to the former captives who had taken the fish as, so to speak, financial compensation. Andrew was a little shocked, and at first even wanted to refuse the money at all. But his wife was against it. Kate insisted that he really had earned some moral compensation during his imprisonment. He deserved some moral compensation. And besides, they could use the money. They could build a house without a loan. That's what they decided to do, and that's what they did. And though neither Kate nor Andrew could predict what life had in store for them, but somehow, on some instinctive and almost mystical level, it seemed to them that they would never again face such severe shocks and dangers as they had recently experienced.
Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana had been hanging frozen tea and dainty silver spoons for over a minute now. From the outside, it might have seemed that the elderly lady was under hypnosis. In part, it was indeed so, for her mind was possessed by sad memories. Betty, you have no idea what a heavy burden loneliness is. And on this day, my nerves are on edge. In the voice of the mistress of the mansion, tears were heard, although in the mise-en-scene itself there was a great deal of feigned emotion. But dramas and tragedies were an indispensable attribute of Adriana's life, and this feature of her character was perfectly studied by Betty, who for almost 30 years managed all the affairs in the house, and now is a companion and mistress. Although the relations between the two women could be called friendly only with a huge stretch, they were bound together like Siamese twins. Betty watched her mistress while a hymn of justice played in her soul. Its fierce melodies, her inner voice sang along. The old witch got what she deserved. And I have no pity for you. But aloud, Betty said the words with a deep sigh. Adriana, my dear Adriana, it's time for you to calm down. Don't tear your heart out. You have to get over it. It's been so many years. The hostess, in a flurry of feelings, again grabbed the spoon, but noticing that the cup was empty, she threw the innocent cutlery, utensils, decorated with women's painting tray. The companion immediately obligingly asked for more tea. Yes, she waved her hand regally. You can only warm it with an ordinary kettle. Electric appliances spoil the water. After this tea, I feel quite sick. Betty went to the kitchen, but she could hear her hostess talking in a low voice in the huge living room. It's been so many years, and I still don't believe it. That's understandable. Any mother in my position would behave the same way, because my heart refuses to believe. Ethan, where are you, my only son? This vivid monologue was clearly intended for an audience, but the layout has long been accustomed to such outbursts of its mistress or friend, or unfortunate friend. A wave of schadenfreude was once again tossed to the surface of the gray day. Cruel words in their content. You got what you deserved. And now, for the rest of your days, you will reap the poisonous harvest sown in Iran, of evil. Unlike her mistress Betty, she spoke softly, so she couldn't hear her. Adriana was unaware of her companion's true regard for her person. She was so in love with herself that she was absolutely sure that other people felt the same way about her. When some years ago, she offered her homes to the governor, the position of a friend, she had thought it made the humble woman happy. Of course, she could have refused, and there were many reasons for that. But she had accepted. Perhaps it was out of self-interest, because it paid a companion a solid monthly allowance. Or maybe the reason for consent was the desire to watch with her own eyes and the collapse of the unsinkable Titanic, as the recently deceased retired general called his wife. As a matter of fact, it is a summer house and an apartment in the city, as well as other things. Property inherited Adriana after the death of her husband. Only Without Consolation widow was not happy about such an inheritance. And Betty, when asking neighbors, they were very interested in the fate of the estate, always answered with restraint. How could I know what the mistress was thinking? I haven't learned to read other people's minds. But curious inhabitants of the Dacha village by old habit tried to avoid the house of the general. That's why nobody dared to have a heart-to-heart talk with her. All the blame was not a fatty in character, but a daughter. Many remember the ugly deed of the woman. Immediately after moving in with their husband in the mansion, the general was given a government dacha for eternal use for merit. But everything was managed by his wife, who was 15 years younger than her spouse. Michael Jackson himself was a cordial man and was not averse to spending free time in good company. He also decided to celebrate the housewarming party with a bang, so he invited almost all of his fellow villagers. But the young wife did not like the feast. In the middle of the party, the woman turned off the music and started yelling at her husband in front of all the people. "Michael, what kind of rabble have you gathered here? These people are screaming like crazy. They sing dirty songs, and the child hears it all." Michael tried to stop his wife. "Adriana, we sang war songs. It's the great legacy of our fathers. I don't know why they seemed inappropriate to you." "Yeah, because the singers weren't in voice, or look who you got the choir from. Couldn't you have picked a different company? Think what your coworkers will say when they find out you're treating them to a drink with a carpenter and a tractor driver." This was a direct insult to those present. The offended villagers began to hurriedly disperse to their homes. Nadeau, with her arms folded on her chest, watched the scene with satisfaction. She had the conscience to accompany the process. "You are right to wish the wishes of the guests. Have a good day. If you have time, be sure to come by." The general was ready to fall through the ground in shame. One of the guests was not confused and beat back the hostess unfriendly. "And good luck to you, Auntie. You have a protective name that fits your character." Michael was silent at the guest's outburst, and what could he say in defense of his wife? If a man fully revealed the essence of his wife, the man himself sometimes called his wife in his heart. The messengers from Adriana. Though much water has passed since then, Betty remembers the shameful housewarming party. After all, she had been enlisted only days before that momentous occasion. Until then, she had no idea that Adriana was a bitch in the fullest sense of the word. The day after the ingloriously completed housewarming party, New Dumont wanted to quit, but Michael himself asked her to stay. The general's hobby was fishing, and the morning after the unsuccessful party he headed to the river with a simple fishing rod. Betty at that time was putting in order in the outbuilding, where she planned to settle down with her son for the time of her service with the general's couple. "I hear you're from around here." "Not exactly. I'm from a neighboring village. Your literate speech indicates you're an educated man. What made you agree to such, one might say, not a prestigious job?" The woman laughed. Only in her laughter there was bitterness and despair. "You're right on the mark. I'm a bibliographer by training, but nobody needs such specialists today. Times are hard these days, and I have a child, and he needs to be fed and clothed. That's why I was very happy about this job." The man put aside his fishing rod and thoughtfully said, "Yes, for the sake of children, we are ready for anything. I would like this parental sacrifice to be justified in the future by worthy deeds of our children. My wife said that you also have a son. Yes, my Sam will go to 5th grade in the fall, and our Ethan is in 7th. I want him to be in the military too. We've got officers on the male side of the family, but my wife is totally against it. She says the military profession is not honored today. I don't understand how one can think like that, but it's useless to prove to my wife simple truths. She's like the Titanic. She's impenetrable. The Titanic only looked like that, but it was a sad story." And Michael looked at Betty in surprise and then exclaimed, "You're 100% right. So I've chosen a very poor comparison for my spouse." The man took the rod. "It's been a pleasure talking to you. And please don't leave us. She's not always so abrupt. In fact, she's a very vulnerable person. Sometimes you just have to ignore her antics. I've learned that art over the years. Of course, I have no right to demand the same of you, but I'm asking you to stay." There was so much sincerity and even pleading in the tone of this strong-willed man that she changed her mind. The woman looked at her host, who strode briskly toward the river. "Have you thought about yourself? Why do such good men get such bad wives? I mean, she's a real girder. Would it be interesting to see her around the general's wives? Does she behave as boorishly in the circle of her own kind?" The kettle whistled loudly, followed by Adriana's equally loud shout. "Betty, my light, where did you disappear, leaving me alone? You wanted fresh tea." Yes, sorry, it slipped my mind. It's all this life of unsettlement." Betty, deftly maneuvering between antique vases and cabinets, reached the center of the living room with a tray. "Here's some fresh tea. Maybe we could eat something substantial. You haven't had breakfast yet today." "Betty, how can I think about food on a day like this? The very thought of it is sacrilegious. Exactly 25 years ago, my Ethan disappeared. Adriana is 24 years old. It's been exactly 24 years since the day the men from the military came to you and Michael's house to report Ethan's disappearance." The hostess glared shrilly at her companion, but held back her anger. "All the days have been the same to me for a long time, so it's easy to lose count. When Michael was alive, it was easier to bear. When he was gone, I was orphaned." There were sobs. Betty realized she would have to find some convincing words to comfort her. However, every year on September 12, everything went about the same way, so she was ready to comfort the mad widow from morning until evening. But contrary to this expectation, she withdrew her hand. "You don't have to comfort me. I know exactly what you're thinking at this very moment. And don't interrupt me. Do you think I deserve this torment? That I'm being punished for my language and my filthy behavior?" Silence. "Don't say anything now, let me speak, because it is indeed time for me, as Solomon said, to gather stones." Betty froze, for it was the first time in many years that she had seen her mistress in such a state. In the words and behavior of this elderly but still attractive woman, there was not a drop on the games of youth in her eyes with so much pain and despair that the component felt uncomfortable. After all, only a few minutes ago she had wished that the mistresses had hot coals raining down from the sky on her head. For a few seconds, both women were silent, and only in the huge living room the antique clock was counting the running of time. Adriana Foyer lived in an armchair, like a metronome. When the dead are remembered, they always play a metronome. But I don't want to, and I refuse to believe Ethan died. My heart tells me he's alive, and I want to find him. And you're supposed to help me." This statement was so unexpected that Betty almost dropped the expensive tray. "Betty, why are you standing there like a statue? The tea must be cold again." Betty had another remarkable characteristic. She could easily change from a formal tone to a traitorous address. It was a sign to the person she was talking to. What was the widow's state of mind? Betty, too, realized how to behave with her hostess. "Adriana, if it's in my power, I'm here to help you. And if I had any doubts, I wouldn't be having this conversation today. Of course you can help me, but indirectly. You're talking so strangely today." "Nothing strange, Betty. Where does he work?" "That's right, in the authorities, where everyone knows everything about everyone. But you and I have made a dozen or two inquiries, but we always get the same answer. And I'm not talking about Ethan. Have your Sam run it through his sources? Where do I find Kathy?" Doe sipped her tea loudly with a satisfied look. They couldn't recover from her request. "You want to find your sister-in-law. What's objectionable about that? It's only natural. After all, Kathy was my son's lawful wife, and I threw her out with an infant in her arms. And now I want to apologize. Yeah, I've been flooded with tears of despair again, thinking I'm a bitch. Maybe you are. But how many times have I behaved for what I did? It just happened that day. I was out of my mind with grief. And then she shows up with that baby, and she's smiling." Betty also remembers the day her mother-in-law kicked the poor girl out the door. But before that, she poured a lot of mud on the young mother's head. After all, her daughter-in-law had given birth a month before the due date, and the baby didn't look like a premature baby. Adriana then in a statement and shouted, "You fucked this baby." And now, claiming it's our grandson, our son is missing. And now you want to pin this man on us. You'll never get away with it. Go back to your village. Where did you come from? Michael tried to calm his wife down, but he wasn't in the best condition either. After the news of his son's death, the man wanted to stand up for his daughter-in-law, but it was sluggish. His wife, however, bought the words about the young daughter-in-law. She jumped out into the street and from the high porch of the mansion began to water Kathy with the last words. Since she was with a child in her arms and a bag with modest belongings, she ran away from the house of her husband's parents. But she was met with insults and accusations of sins she had not committed. Betty looked at the landlady. "I don't think Kathy will forgive you. I mean, you've basically ruined her whole life. And why did you bring her up today? I know there's no forgiveness. Would you believe that over the years, I've woken up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because Ethan's voice whispered to me, 'Mom, how could you do this to them? They are my son and your grandson.' But my pride prevented me from organizing a search for Kathy before. And then yesterday, just before the damn date, someone told me so clearly to find her again. I don't even know my grandson's name. His name is Michael, after his grandfather." The hostess froze with surprise, and her unblinking gaze began to kindle Betty's forehead. "Betty, and how do you know such details?" "Kathy told me by accident, but that was before you kicked her out. I can't make any promises about helping you find her. You see, I can't order my son around, especially now he lives far away from me. And then I'm not sure Kathy herself would want to see you." Adriana said nothing. She turned her chair to the window and sat there all day watching the clouds floating across the sky. Several times Betty peered into the living room, but the hostess remained in the same unchanged position. It wasn't until it began to get dark that the companion ventured closer to the sleeper, her hands clasping a framed photograph. The picture showed Ethan and Kathy smiling happily. People sometimes don't think about why coincidences happen in life. Some people think that someone invisible in heaven is controlling earthly life to make it a little romantic. This unknown mastermind of the universal show lights the stars. People look at these celestial sparks and make different wishes, but very rarely do these dreams become reality. Kathy, too, had once blindly trusted the stars. Even now, when she knew the bitterness of loss and betrayal, she still hoped that these celestial beacons could bring a miracle. On this September evening, she sat opposite the window and waited for the dark sky to come alive with stars. On the desk among a mountain of unchecked notebooks lay an old photo in a simple frame. The woman gently stroked her hand over the glass, on which 2 tears immediately fell. "Hello, Ethan. How are you? I know you're alive, and I'm sure we'll meet again. It's just not time yet, but I am ready to wait even for eternity, because I love only you alone." Kathy gently wiped the glass again, and just as carefully, she put the picture back. She did not even suspect that there in the distant Moscow suburbs, the mother of her missing husband also at this moment clutched to her chest exactly the same photo. Only that photo is on a more expensive frame. The woman ordered herself only not to write. "It's time to get to work. Otherwise, I'll have to check the essays of my Lomonosov." Kathy did not just love her work. She couldn't breathe without school, and the kids didn't bother her. The fact that she had to carry knowledge to children in this respectful provincial town. The rather modest living conditions did not matter to her. It was not by chance that her son often called her manly Spartans. Michael was proud of his mother, and he was not at all shocked that the boys often laughed at him. When Kathy learned about this, she was at first afraid that the guy may form complexes, but he noticed the change in his mother's behavior and tried to calm her down. "Mom is not worried about me. Everything will be fine." Yeah, a lot of guys tell me I'm a mama's boy, but I don't see anything humiliating about it. I mean, we're all living on this planet. We're all mom's kids. Then Kathy realized that her 13-year-old son had grown up. Only an accomplished man could philosophize so freely. Thinking of her son now, Kathy smiled. Where was he missing about the shower? He promised to call more often, but he doesn't keep his promise. And then there's the military. Kathy moved the stack of notebooks closer and opened the first one she found. Let's see what R. Smith wrote about the meaning of life. Every class has its own leader. William Smith's orders never left the agenda of every board meeting, and his mom was a frequent visitor to the vice principal's office. But despite the restless character, the boy was literate, wrote and loved books, which is generally uncharacteristic of modern youth. The essay of the Perturber of Order was laconic in volume, but rich in content. Most of all, Kathy hit the phrase, "The meaning of life is when you choose your own goal and move towards it." Weak people cannot withstand and turn down halfway. And then they scold everyone, but not themselves. That's why I always take an example from those who are ready for any difficulties, from those who never turn off the path, despite some stylistic mistakes. Kathy gave it an A, such a smart boy, but behavior. She read her students' essays, and it felt like she was reading someone else's mind. And it made her feel uncomfortable inside. More than once, the teacher caught herself thinking that children's essays are a very sensitive structure, especially for teenagers. But unfortunately, even very experienced teachers, sometimes unconsciously, hurt unprotected children's souls with their careless attitude. She remembers how during her internship she was outraged by the ugly act of one class lady who read in front of everyone the essay of a girl who wrote about her innermost dreams. Despite the rules of subordination, the then student called the old teacher destructive to children's souls. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind then. You, the older generation, scold the youth without end, while you yourselves commit low deeds. Children have entrusted you with their deepest dreams, and you just publicly humiliated that girl. It's disgusting. The senior colleagues were astonished by the fiery speech. The trainee, but only the math teacher was willing to stand up for her. She's right. You can't treat children like some formless substance. Every child is an individual who needs to be respected. Kathy cried for a long time afterwards, worrying about a student she didn't know, who had been shamed by her old teacher in front of the whole class. She vowed that she would never follow such an example. That incident touched her deeply because she herself had been the victim of adult mistakes many times during her school years. Kathy grew up in a family where everything was built on trust. Her mother worked as a cook in a sanatorium and her father was a driver. Besides her, there were 2 other children in the family. So the parents had to work hard to clothe and feed such a crowd. But they never complained about the fate. On the contrary, they were happy to have a big family. Benjamin was very proud of his children and liked to repeat, "My mother and I are doing our best, and we will nurse our grandchildren. We will create a commune. The girls will do the nightmare. The boys will fish and chop wood." The men laughed at him at work. "Your dreams are primitive." Today, normal people dream of prosperity. They want to travel abroad. You're thinking down to earth. Those who are tied to the land are more adapted to life. I'm sure my children will grow up to be decent people. My father was an old school man, so he believed in justice. But other mores were already prevailing in society. The cult of money was seeping into every aspect of life, and even the school with its traditions could not withstand the onslaught of change. Now powerful parents could dictate their own rules. Kathy and her parents had to face such injustice in the last year of school. A youth forum was to be held in the capital, and the school had to send 3 delegates to the event. Kathy was on her way to a gold medal. She was first on the list. Together with her, 2 more of the best students from the 9th grade were to go to Moscow. The girl began to prepare intensively, and with the help of the class teacher wrote a short report on the work that is carried out in the school. But just a few hours before departure, when the team was already assembled, she was summoned to the director. In the office, in addition to the principal and 2 head teachers, there were still strangers. The principal, blushing and paler, said, "Bracker, unfortunately, you are not going to the forum." Kathy's breath caught, but she clenched her fists to keep from crying. Why, Bracker? Don't take offense, but you can't delegate the same people from our institution all the time. There are other guys. They may not be stars from the sky, as it's fashionable to say nowadays, but they deserve to represent our school too. And that's what our sponsors think. The principal nodded towards a group of men in expensive suits, and as if on cue, they smiled. But Kathy caught something unpleasant in their smiles. Later in her life, she'd encountered those same smiles more than once. But that first time, for a 16-year-old girl, the cancellation of her trip came as a shock. She ran home in tears, leaving her parents in tears. I'm not going anywhere. The girl cried all evening, tucked into her pillow. When she recounted her visit to the principal's office, Benjamin was outraged. And I won't let it go. I will not allow my child's soul to be mutilated. Kathy had never seen her father in such a state, but she had not yet fully realized what had happened. The next day, the head of the large family went in search of the truth. He returned from school depressed and immediately asked, "Mother, pour me 100 grams, otherwise I can't vouch for myself." All serious matters. Parents always discussed without the children. But this time, the father called Kathy. The mother tried to show him with signs that he shouldn't do that. Benjamin said, "Our children can't live permanently in the cocoon of our worries. Let them get used to this life at once. Let them know that everything in this world is ruled by connections and money." The principal is basically a kind woman and a true professional, but she has a family too. As I understand it, she was put under a lot of pressure and she gave in. There was desperation and a kind of hopeless resignation in the man's voice. He took another drink, though he'd never allowed himself to do that in front of children before. "You, Kathy, forgive your father. I couldn't stand up for you. Those ghouls in expensive jackets told me directly to know my place and not to make waves. What are you doing with your pig's snout, you stupid driver? Yeah, these are the times. Bras run everything now. But nothing, my daughter. There will be a holiday on our street." Kathy was used to trusting her father from childhood. She believed that for him there were no difficulties. But that night she realized that childhood was over. And Daddy was an ordinary man, not a wizard. She couldn't sleep for a long time and looked at mega things from the sky stars. The naive girl that night did not yet know that the most terrible trials were ahead of her. After that incident with the failed trip, Kathy began to categorically refuse any public errands. Stroppy pupil more than once called on the carpet to shame, but she always calmly replied that she simply did not have enough time. "Is there no one else to send but me? I'm not the only one in this school. Especially now I have to prepare hard for the entrance because my parents have no money for tutors." The defiant behavior of the graduate annoyed the teachers, but they could not do anything and soon retreated. According to the plan, after the awarding of diplomas, there were supposed to be large-scale events. Parents spent a whole year collecting money to buy a beautiful dress for their daughter's graduation party. For the celebration, it was decided to rent a banquet hall of the only decent restaurant in the city. When the father voiced the amount to be paid for the farewell to the school, Kathy objected. "Daddy, I don't want to attend this vanity parade. I'll get my diploma, and that's it." The mother tearfully began to persuade her daughter. "Kathy, daughter, think what people will say. They'll count me and my father with bills or beggars. After all, prom night is an unshakable tradition." The girl hugged her mother. "Mom, I used to think so too and dreamed of becoming a prom queen, but now I realize that I don't need it. Much more important for me now is the fact of receiving a diploma and enrollment. And then, I don't want us to spend money on absolutely unnecessary things. You'd better buy a new TV because the old one works every other day." The friends also discussed Bracker's refusal from graduation for a long time. Some thought that this decision was caused by resentment for the trip that didn't take place. Others called the medals from her uncle's gore business. Of course, the case when she was removed from the list of forum delegates on the last day became a kind of watershed. because it helped the young girl to see the world not through rose-colored glasses, but as it really is. So she said goodbye to the school. Without much regret or remorse, Kathy had long dreamed of becoming a teacher, even though her father had discouraged her. But why would you want to be a teacher? Young people today want to be lawyers or economists. You're pretty good at math. Could you go into this, like his programming? A teacher is an honorable profession, but it's not in favor nowadays. Dad, that's exactly the reason I want to go to teacher training school. You're single-handedly decided to restore the prestige of this profession. Why not? Somebody has to start a renaissance. Perhaps it's the right thing to do. Teachers, like doctors, are the future of the country. That's why I approve of your decision. There was a shortage of teachers that year, so Kathy was welcomed with open arms. The admission committee was even more pleased that the medalist dreams of entering the philological faculty. One lady enthusiastically remarked how nice it is that there are those among today's youth who are interested in the great heritage of our language. Perhaps in the foreseeable future, we will be able to regain the title of the most reading country. Kathy was not distracted by entertainment and idle conversations with fellow students. She was fully immersed in her studies, but her friends still managed to persuade her once to take part in an unusual event. Kathy, but be a friend and help me out. You see, it's not just dancing, lessons, it's a serious event. The organizers want to do something like a 19th century New Year's Eve ball. Imagine the fantasy. Although the girl was already intrigued, noticed it well. But the format of the ball implies a certain dress code. What are we going to wear? Not in jeans. Kathy, we're all set. We're getting costumes from the movie studio. The event will be televised, so it's in everyone's interest to make sure it goes off without a hitch. Imagine the dresses. Kathy, it's going to be quite an extravaganza, and you have to be a part of it. But not Kathy, not her friends. Couldn't even in their wildest dreams imagine what the costume designer of the country's premier movie studio was really like. They were led through a labyrinth of corridors for a long time, until finally they found themselves in front of a door with a sign Women's Costumes, 19th century. Behind this door opened a center that every girl dreamed of in her heart. Such beauty and luxury in one place Kathy had never seen. A few hours of premiering and fitting outfits, and the young ladies were ready to conquer hearts. One of the girls said, "Now we can go dancing." Kathy was surprised. "But you didn't warn me that I had to learn more dances. This is a surprise. You're covered head to toe in dust. It's time to shake it off. And it's not just any ball. There will be cavaliers in uniforms and cavaliers. These are cadets from the military school. And we'll have to learn a classical ballroom dance to keep up appearances." The first master class was held within the walls of the military school. The choreographer immediately got down to business. He loudly commanded the young men, "We have time to spare, so we will work fruitfully. Now we'll pick up the ladies' dates. Then we'll learn a few basic elements. Since there's not much time for dance lessons, we'll limit ourselves to the bare minimum." It took the dance teacher no more than 5 minutes to get the two crowds of students into line. Carrie's partner was a tall, blonde man. The young man immediately suggested, "Let's get acquainted, so it will be easier for us." Ethan, Kathy. But the young people did not have time to shake hands because the dance teacher suddenly shouted right above their heads, "Talking in formation, do not get distracted. Get movement and consistency. The whole country will be looking at you. I have no intention of embarrassing myself in front of 1 million of our fellow citizens. Almost 3 days with little breaks for sleep and food." The students of 2 schools learned the waltz and the cheerful thunderclap. By evening, their feet were aching badly. Kathy, laughing, shared her experiences with Ethan. "I feel like I've run a marathon." Indeed, our preparations for the New Year's Eve ball are like a dance marathon. But I don't regret running it. Why? Ethan looked around and then whispered quietly, "Because you and I have met. I already feel like you're not a fragile, painful dance partner, but a real battle buddy." Carrie, it was interesting with Ethan. The young man shone with erudition and witty jokes, and they had no shortage of topics for conversation. After 3 days of acquaintance, Kathy had the feeling that she had known this smiling fellow for a long time. When she told him that, he laughed. "I have similar feelings. It is possible, Kathy, that we have met in a past life, so the present one should not be separated." Kathy didn't mind this suggestion because she was magnetically attracted to Ethan. A few months later, they couldn't live without each other. The 5-minute officer didn't get wise, but simply suggested it one day. "Kathy, how would you like to be my wife?" The girl also did not play the princess and immediately answered, "I look at it positively." Ethan smiled. He loved Kathy because she didn't have that nasty Mansky quality that most girls had. "If that's the case, then let's bring this news down on the heads of our ancestors. Just tell me, who are we going to surprise first, yours or mine?" Ethan pretended to think agonizingly. Then he got excited and shouted, "We'll flip a coin. If it comes up tails, we go to yours, and the heads will be mine." The lot chose the groom's parents, and the couple didn't hesitate to visit. Adriana pretended to be so virtuous. She glowed and raved, trying to please her guest. "Son, why didn't you tell me you weren't coming alone, but with a girlfriend?" "It's not a girlfriend. Mom and Dad, please love and welcome my future wife, Kathy. We filed the application today." Ethan's parents were now the two of them wailing their hearts out, and Michael even disappeared for a moment to pay for his ceremonial tunic. For such an occasion, I must be in full readiness. When Kathy saw the general's epaulets, she felt dizzy. She jerked sharply at Ethan's arm and whispered, "This isn't fair. Why didn't you warn me that your father was a general?" The young man, she also whispered back, "Well, first of all, generals are simple people like you and me. And secondly, my father is already retired, but he always keeps a good attitude because he wants to be an example for me. Ethan, you have great parents." The evening passed quickly, and Kathy never once felt awkward or tense. Adriana very tactfully asked the girl about her family and her studies. She was pleasantly surprised to learn that Kathy had graduated with a gold medal and would be receiving her diploma in just a month. Such coincidences happened. Ethan, too, would soon be on his way to his duty station. Michael looked pleased and emphasized that Adriana was not going alone, but with his wife. And for a young officer, the main thing is to strengthen the rear at once. I at one time missed this point, for which I received the nickname Evil Polkin. Then I was in the rank of colonel, but I did not have a wife, so I'm with this case late, counting for 2 decades years. But better late than never. Yes, I felt sorry for you, and even allowed myself to wag my finger at the general. And you'd be completely lost, my general, if it weren't for me. Kathy, you don't realize what children they are. I mean men. And even a general's epaulets don't make them serious. After all, my Michael was a street kid until he was 40. That's why I had so much to put up with him. I gave up the stage for him. I could have had a stupendous career. Adriana rolled her sweaty eyes prettily, and the general laughed heartily. My wife tells everyone that story. The reality was a little different. Her theater went bankrupt, and there was no prospect of getting a job in another. And then I came along. The girl agreed to be my wife. What struck Kathy most of all was how different Ethan's parents were. How do you get along with them? I'm sometimes surprised myself. Mom can be like that sometimes. How can I put it softer? Arrogant, or something. She often boasts about her position and isn't even embarrassed about it. You can't tell from her. Although first impressions aren't always the right ones. But your mom fascinates me. I think she feels the same way about you. To be honest, I'm surprised. I wonder why. I'll tell you, don't get jealous of me. I won't. So what's the intrigue? Mom's been looking for a bride for me for the last few months. The list included 2 daughters of her friends and even some of my father's former coworkers. Didn't you find someone worthy of the job? No, there wasn't. Because I met you before I met you. And to tell you the truth, I didn't expect my mother to welcome you so warmly. My mom's a bit of a weirdo, but she really struck a chord with me today. But Ethan didn't know his mother well. When he got home, she was waiting for him in the living room. "Mom, are you awake? What's got you so excited? How can I sleep well when my only son is getting married? You don't like my choice. I will not curve my soul." Not satisfied with Kathy, of course, smart and very nice girl, but she has no breed. The young man was indignant. "Mom, will you at least out of respect for me to pick up expressions? People are not cats or dogs to choose them by pedigree. Yes, my fiancé's parents are ordinary people, but that fact is of absolutely no consequence to me. You should. An officer shouldn't have a wife from the wiretaps. The only consolation is that your Kathy's well-educated. She's a teacher, after all. Otherwise, my father and I wouldn't approve of this marriage. Don't speak for me." Michael went noisily into the living room in his pajamas. "Why are you arguing in the middle of the night? Don't you have enough to talk about in the middle of the day? I'm ordering everyone to bed. Stand down." The man poured from the water and drank a whole glass. "The fish didn't jump today. She must have fallen in love. If you are interested in my opinion, I am in favor of each person deciding his own life issues. Our son's old enough to be an officer, and you shouldn't impose your opinion on him, let alone choose a wife for him." Though Adriana skillfully guided her general, but there were times when she knew it was better to remain silent. This was just such a moment. Michael turned off the lights in the living room, signaling that he would not tolerate a mess in the house. "My general's on a rampage. It's time for you and me to go to the barracks, son." Sergeyevich could chomp on the cheek and went to his room. A month later, the whole Daksha village was celebrating a wedding. It was summer, so the celebration was held outdoors. Kathy's mother along with Betty and the others. It was the Syrians who prepared so many treats that the table was bursting with abundance. To Ethan's surprise, Adriana too decided to join in the common cause. She put on her apron coquettishly and got busy preparing a dessert of fresh berries. She liked the process so much that she repeated it without end. She didn't even realize that cooking was such a fascinating activity. Betty supported her hostess. "You'll enjoy it even more when the guests will start to take away the delicious food you've prepared. We are sure they will praise you, because indeed the dessert turned out tender and very tasty." "Thank you, Betty. Now, after my son's wedding, I'll have a new hobby." But those plans were not to be. For a whole month, the newlyweds were studied because they were both taking their last credits and exams. Everyone was waiting where Ethan would be sent for further service. Kathy even packed her things little by little, but a month passed by followed by a second one. And there was no change. There was one positive change, though. Kathy was getting ready to become a mom. This news did not make her mother-in-law happy for some reason. Adriana looked at her daughter-in-law, and through her teeth she said, strangely enough, no sooner had she cried out bitterly, and she was already in the position. Kathy tried not to dwell on the mood of her mother-in-law, who increasingly looked at her with icy eyes. Only once did she ask Ethan, "Your mother's not happy all the time. Should we get an apartment so we don't embarrass them?" "Kathy, don't be silly. In your situation, you need support, and your parents are far away." "Wait a minute. What are you preparing me for? Aren't we going to your duty station together?" The man realized he blurted it out and tried to remedy the situation. "Kathy, I'm a military man and must be ready for any turn of events. In a word, wherever I am ordered, I will go to serve. But for now, the matter remains open." 2 days later, Ethan came home excited. "We leave at 200 hours, so we must hurry up with the packing. For God's sake, don't put anything extra, or they'll throw it out at the inspection." Kathy froze in a daze, a bad feeling creeping up on her spine. "Ethan, what about me?" Ethan was hurriedly putting the necessary things into his backpack. He hugged his young wife tenderly. "What are you all about? Everything will be fine. We'll be part of the peacekeeping force, so there's no need to worry." Adriana was no less worried than her daughter-in-law. "Son, at least tell me where Mom will be. You're a general's wife, and you know very well that such questions can't be asked to the military." Yes, I know. I'm sorry, but I completely forgot about your father's status. Because right now, like hundreds of other mothers, I'm worried about my son. In just half an hour, the women had the young officer packed for the road. Ethan was in a great hurry and refused to eat lunch. He did not allow the women to see him off. For the rest of her life, Kathy remembered Ethan's smiling face and his farewell. Everything will be all right with us. I'll be back. The black limousine blinked its taillights arrogantly and quickly disappeared around the corner leading to the federal highway. Betty thoughtfully asked why a young officer who had graduated yesterday was being driven around in a limousine. It was the first time I'd ever seen such a thing. Du proudly shook Kudryashov on his head. Betty, you don't understand anything about military service. Don't forget that Ethan is a general's son. As far as I know, pedigree doesn't matter in the army. That was the case yesterday, but that's all changed today. Haven't they, Kathy? But the young woman was still staring into the darkness where the black car had disappeared. He'll come back. He promised me. Betty stirred. Adriana, I don't think your sister-in-law is all right. It's probably from worry. It's not good for her to be in such a state. God forbid it affects the child. I think it was kind of the governor to take the girl inside. Come along, my dear. You mustn't be nervous. My mother-in-law was about to join me. But then she changed her mind. She couldn't understand whether she was more concerned about her son or her daughter-in-law. Of course, Kathy herself was not the object of her attention, but she carried their grandson under her heart. On the veranda, where she was giving her spouse a cheerful meditation, Michael was there. Ethan was there. You should at least come out to see your son off. I don't like long send-offs, so I didn't show up on purpose. It's very hard for Ethan now. The first time and then this. What is it, Michael? Tell me what it's about. Don't torture me. You know everything. Don't yell. I know as much as you do. Don't forget, I've been retired a long time. It's just a hunch. But there's no other option. How about we just wait? Unexpected joy whispered fervently to Michael. I'm willing to wait months and years for my son to be okay. But Kathy, will we have her all this time? I don't get it. Is it too much of a burden for you to have your son's wife around? We just have to take care of her. In Michael's voice, there was a note that always frightened Christina, so she was silent. But in her head, under the lovely curls of her glasses, were not good thoughts. I'm not at all happy with this girl's campaign. Let her go to her relatives. There's no reason for her to give up here. The next day in the morning, while everyone in the house was asleep, dialed the number of parents of the daughter-in-law. The girl's father answered the phone. The wily mother-in-law made her voice more tragic and tearful. Benjamin, sweet Ethan is on a business trip. That's the thing. He's not going anywhere. Kathy, the poor thing is suffering. Don't take this the wrong way, but Michael and I thought it would be best in her situation to be surrounded by family. Yes, she spoke very convincingly. The girl's father listened to her carefully and promised, you should have called us earlier. By the weekend, we'll definitely be on the verge. Oh, Benjamin, it must be inconvenient for you to take the bus. Why don't we send a car or order a cab for you? You've forgotten that we have our own transportation. It's not a foreign car, but it runs well. Yes, she put the receiver down on the machine and thought about the intricacies of fate for a long time. But after talking to the saint, she calmed down. She'll go to her parents. She'll be much better off there. Who knows? Maybe she'll stay in her miserable little town. But she's no match at all. Our Ethan. In most fairy tales, the heroes get their happily ever after. In Carrie's case, fate was generous to Carrie only in the form of misfortune, since the girl's happiness was short-lived. Evil fate decided to fill her life with troubles and hardships, but Kathy did not yet know what trials awaited her. It was only a few days after Ethan's departure, and the future mother-to-be got a little used to the idea that she would have to live temporarily while waiting for her husband. On Saturday morning, there was first a quiet knock on her room. Then her mother-in-law tiptoed in. How are you feeling, honey? Thank you, Adriana. I'm fine. I slept soundly tonight. That's great. And I came to tell you Kathy jumped up in bed. Ethan's back. You should be embarrassed. No, really. He just went on a business trip. It's at least 6 months. So we have to be patient. That's not what I meant. Your parents are supposed to be here today. We've made arrangements with them. This news really pleased Kathy. In a burst of emotion, she was even embarrassed. Her mother-in-law in her arms and kissed her. Thank you. I really missed them so much in the house too. The mood was high. She marveled at her resourcefulness and mentally repeated what a good girl she was. Bracker would take her daughter and let her stay there until the birth, and maybe even longer. But time passed, and the guests did not appear. Kathy dialed long distance several times, but the answer was a long dial tone. So she called her older sister. Alina, do you know where Mom and Dad are? We're waiting for them to visit. And her sister shouted into the phone. Don't you know yet? Kathy, Mom, and Dad. The tube fell out of the girl's hands. At that moment, a worried Betty appeared on the doorstep. Hurry up and turn on the TV. It's terrible. Kathy recognized her father's car immediately, but the TV footage of the scary crash was pretty. Betty once resembled a pile of regimented metal. Kathy screamed Mommy, Daddy, and barely had time to pick up the body of the unconscious young woman. Probably should call an ambulance. In her condition, it's dangerous. After the terrible tragedy that had robbed her of both her father and mother at once, Kathy lived like a dream. She automatically performed the proper actions, but she did it indifferently. It was as if her emotions had died in her. For 2 months, she didn't go out at all, and Betty was very disturbed by her condition. She decided to talk to Adriana about her daughter-in-law's future. Yes, I'm sorry, but I get the impression that you don't care about Kathy. You know, Betty, you're right. I just don't understand why you care so much about my sister-in-law. Maybe you have your reasons. I don't know what you're implying. I'm just saying. Oh, by the way, I was wondering if your Constantine knows Kathy. If I'm not mistaken, your son is in internal affairs in the capital, and they may have met there. That's a strange question you're asking. Unlike some people, I'm not in the habit of prying into my adult son's affairs. Adriana shook her lips, but said nothing. Another month and a half passed, and a new grief fell on the young woman's shoulders. On a Sunday afternoon, men in civilian clothes showed up, but it was not hard to tell from their posture that they were military. One man looked over the quite superior figure of his mind forward, belly forward, and invited Christina. We need to talk to you. The woman already knew what this stern-looking man would say. She clasped her hands together in a lock so that her fingers beat. Did the man take his eyes away from her? No, more precisely, it is not yet known for sure. He's missing. There were 4 other men on patrol with him, 2 dead, 1 in intensive care, but critical condition. The survivors said they were attacked, ambushed. They're working on different versions, but nothing yet. We have to wait. Yeah, we have to wait. Adriana stared at some point in front of her, stunned like that. She had been caught by her sister-in-law after the men in black suits had left their manor. Kathy had never seen her mother-in-law like that. Adriana, what's wrong? Don't be silent, please. Ethan, my Ethan is gone. The women sobbed and hugged each other. Then Betty joined them. And during the night, Kathy went into labor. The labor was not due for another month, so everyone was worried about the health of the baby. Betty was eager to share her knowledge. Month-to-month families survive better than month-to-month families. Boys are especially vulnerable. But God willing, they'll be fine. Nadeau kept quiet. She only called the maternity hospital once, and after that she walked around for a week as if she had water in her mouth. Betty decided to take the initiative. Aren't you going to go and see Kathy? She probably needs to get her discharge stuff. And the baby too. And if you can't wait, you can go, but I'm not going. On the 5th day, Kathy and the baby were discharged to the happy mother. Her mother-in-law wouldn't let her in the house. Adriana's eyes burned with hatred. This baby is not my son. I don't know, and I don't want to know who you took him out with. And now you want to force it on us." Kathy cradled the infant to his chest. She couldn't believe her ears. "Yeah, what are you talking about?" She's still asking. "I thought it was weird that you got pregnant so fast." "You're the one on the side. She was out with someone else. She's using my son as a cover. Otherwise, how do you explain that an 8-month-old baby was born weighing 3,800, almost 4 kilograms? Isn't that a lot for a premature baby? And your suspicions are unfounded. Look at your grandson. He looks just like Ethan." Kathy held out a cool blue envelope to her mother-in-law, but she roughly pushed it away. "Don't try to push pity." And never admit it to be Strelchenko, and go to the place where she walked. Let them feed you there and sing Betty, pack her things. And in 5 minutes, neither she nor her freak will be here. Kathy, hoping to find support. She looked at Michael, who was silently watching the scene. But Michael looked away. This sign spoke eloquently that he fully supported his wife. Betty took out 2 suitcases with Kathy's things and whispered quietly, "I'll walk you out." Feeding time was approaching, and the baby began to scream loudly. They threatened. "Kathy's not the ones, not the rubbers. This isn't a homeless shelter. Otherwise, I can call the police. You don't have a residency here. I'll tell them you're begging." Betty almost forced the girl off the estate. "Kathy, let's spend the night. I'll put you up with my sister. She lives nearby. And then we'll figure something out." Relatives home. The ruler turned out to be a surprisingly kind and charming woman. Betty briefly noticed Stacia is a nurse, so the baby is in good hands. The women tended to the newborn, and Kathy could not get rid of the image of her mother-in-law that haunted her. She saw the angry face of Ethan's mother and heard those hurtful words again. "Go back to where you were made that child." The worries of the past few months had completely drained the young woman. She didn't notice how she had blacked out. She was brought out of her daze by Betty's voice. "Kathy, what are you going to name the boy? Are you men?" A smile appeared on the young woman's pale face. "In Christina, Ethan said if there is to be a son, name him after his grandfather. That's right, let him carry on the Jackson family line. What a little fellow, eh? He's a real big boy." Kathy went to the small sofa, whereon a white terry towel crushed the strong body of the newborn son. The baby was merrily blowing bubbles and actively moving his arms and legs. The young mom smiled through her tears. "My son, Kuroshka, you are the best baby in the world." The boy answered her in his own language. It was the first dialogue between mother and son, but it was the one that made Kathy move on. For almost a month, Kathy and her newborn son were in the care of her sisters. The young mom was gradually coming back to life, although the future seemed a blurred circulation. "Betty, thank you so much, but I can't stay dependent on you forever." "What are you thinking, Kathy? What are you gonna do with a baby in your arms now?" "I'm gonna look for a job. You'll have plenty of time to work. Let Michael grow up. You're not shy at all. And my Sam thinks my aunt and I are doing the right thing. Remember, girl, there are more good people in the world than evil." This was truly confirmed when Kathy secretly started looking for a job with Betty. Surprisingly, she quickly found an offer that suited her perfectly. A school in a provincial town outside the Urals. It required a teacher of Russian and literature. Without putting things off in a long box, she called and heard joyful, "Come. We have a critical situation, but I have an infant. Do not worry. We will provide you with housing and babysitting. It's true that the salary is very modest, but it's enough for the first time. And we'll help you. We have very kind and helpful people." Betty and her sisters saw Kathy off like family. "Where are you going in such a hurry? You should stay a little longer." We've gotten so used to Kathy. There were lots of tears and words of encouragement. And when Kathy jumped on the train, Betty asked, "Isn't there anything you want to give to your relatives? You know who I mean." "I do know. I've cut them out of my life forever, and I hope I never have to see them again." As the train disappeared into the distance, Betty told her sister that Adriana could expect anything. But Michael surprised me. He could have stood up for the poor girl, but God judged them. And Michael is like his grandfather, but he didn't need his grandson. It's been over 20 years. And then I started talking about Kathy. I hadn't thought of her in years. And to be honest, Betty didn't know what to do. Sure, Sam wouldn't turn her down as she asked. But would Kathy need to? She's probably been married for a long time. It's entirely possible that she's calling someone else daddy too. And here comes Queen Adriana. How will she behave? What will she say? Betty was at a complete loss. She decided she'd wait a little longer. God willing, the old woman would change her mind. Kathy closed the magazine tiredly. What a day. Nearly half the class had started to sniffle and sneeze by the last class period. She'd heard there was a flu going around town, but she didn't believe it was that bad. And she didn't believe it when they said it was 200 hours. And here she was, right in front of her eyes. We had to call the parents to take Shmeika's group to the medic. Half of the brought worse temperature was, and at the door no office is already a line of children and other classes. The directors just grabbed their heads. And another day like this, and we have to close for quarantine. In general, I got home with only one desire to lie down, and at least half an hour not to move. I've got a really nasty headache. Well, I don't want to collapse. Either the words were prophetic, or the disease is too strong. But tonight Kathy called the principal and told her in your voice that she had a fever. Oh, Kathy, what do we do? I realize you didn't do it on purpose. Only you're the third teacher who called me, corrects me, and as soon as she's better and goes to work. Kathy just threw herself on the pillow. How did the phone ring? Mommy, hi. Oh, it's so good to hear from you. Mommy, what's wrong with your voice? Oh, don't mind me. I'm fine. I'm just a little sick. Oh, wow. She's fine. Mommy, I'm Mommy. We'll be here tonight. Oh, Michael, Mom, you don't need anything. I'm just passing through literally 3 o'clock between planes. I got a chill in my soul. Where are you going, son? Mom, please don't worry. It's okay. But how not to worry? Her heart wanted to jump out of her chest, no matter how bad it felt. She got up and began to billet, and for her son to eat fresh, and to take with her. Ate a couple of pills. Seemed to feel a little better. She should get it all done. At 200, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on the doorstep. She rushed over to him, hugged his face, turned away. God forbid Michael get sick. And only then she saw that he wasn't alone. Behind Michael was a girl, small, skinny, really thin, braid like that. That Kathy's arm would be thinner. Mommy, I'd like you to meet her. This is my wife. Kathy almost fell over. Like a wife. Michael laughed. Mom, you look like we kept the wedding from you. We didn't. We were going to do it the way it's supposed to be done. And I got a ride from us last night before we flew out here. Jesus. Kathy hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Being a military wife is even harder than being a bride. Welcome to the family. The girl blushed and suddenly cried. Kathy looked fearfully at her son. Michael hugged his wife. Mom, she was just very worried about how you would accept her. I want her to stay here with you. She's finished her studies. She has no family. Kathy immediately remembered herself. She remembered again how she'd just been chased away from home in shame. No matter how hard she tried, she never forgot. And after all these years, she was just as hurt as before. She hugged the girl. Clara, no one will hurt you here. Come on in. I have so much to cook. I still have time to put all Vanya's things together. Mom, why? Michael looked at her in surprise. You're sick. You've been cooking all night. Kathy looked at him so much that he was immediately embarrassed. Thank you. You know how I like to eat. They settled down in the kitchen. Clara ate a little and started to peck her nose. Then she nestled on Michael's shoulder and dozed off. Mom, tell me, do you know where Dad was sent? No, son, I don't know 100%. But you're a military man. You should know there was only one hot spot back then. Kathy, frozen. What are you, Mom? What are you? These are completely different times, and I'm going to sort of maintain order. It'll be fine. I'm definitely not leaving you guys. You know, son, when Dad left, he said I'd be back for sure. He never lied to me. And I don't feel like he's gone. He's definitely out there somewhere. And I'm sure of that. Just like I'm sure that something terrible probably happened to him, and he can't come. Otherwise, he'd be here. Mom, it's been years. Let's say your gut is right, and he's alive, you know. So he has another family. Well, a man can't go that long without coming back. If he wants to come back. Michael, you just don't know Dad. You don't know how much we loved each other. Kathy suddenly smiled. I didn't get married, even though I could have. She didn't look at her mother for a while, then shifted her gaze to Clara. I really hope that our love is no less than yours and your father's. They are. They're in charge. I have to go. I wouldn't want you to come with me to the airport. Kathy jumped up like a couple. You just got here. 3:00 passed us. They watched as the door closed behind you. In another situation, Kathy would have cried a tear, but now, tucked into her shoulder, she was crying. Clara. Michael. No. So Kathy is responsible for this girl. Come on, Clara. You can't worry so much. You're fine. Clara took her face away from her robe. He'll be back. Everything will be all right after all. Kathy nodded assuredly. Of course. You heard him promise. And my son has kept his word since childhood. She smiled. Once the girl had settled in a bit. A couple of days later at dinner, Kathy began to ask her where she was from and everything. I was born in a small town 100 kilometers from Moscow. My mom worked as a librarian, and my dad drove people around the villages by bus. We were never particularly rich, but we lived well. And then my dad met another woman. I was 13 then. He left us. You can't imagine how scary it is when a person you love, who you trust blindly, betrays you like that, just pushes you away and leaves. It's scary. He never came home again. Mom broke down. She started drinking. There was nothing I could do. When I was 17, her heart just gave out. My dad didn't even come to the funeral. The man was my family man. He knew how scared and hurt I was. And he didn't come. Neighbors helped. My mom's distant relative, her friend. 3 days later, my dad was killed in a car accident. I couldn't not go. I went to the cemetery. A woman rushed up to me. It was his wife. She was crying and screaming that it was my mom's and my fault. That if he hadn't been thinking about us all the time, he wouldn't have gotten drunk after my mom's funeral, which, as it turned out, she hadn't let him attend, wouldn't have gotten drunk, and wouldn't have gotten behind the wheel. That's how in 1 week I was without parents. God, that poor girl. Yeah, it's all right now. I went to school. I'm a nurse now. Which is good, because I've decided if they go anywhere else, I'm going with him. And it doesn't matter if it's a hot spot or not. I'll be useful anywhere, and he won't change my mind. Kathy smiled. She realized at once that such a conversation between the young couple had already taken place. Otherwise, she would not have heard such intonations in her voice, as if she were proving something to Michael. But she had no time to answer. The doorbell rang. Clara was frightened, and Kathy went to open the door. On the doorstep was an embarrassed William Smith. And William, come in. He entered the apartment. Hello, Kathy. I'm from the whole class. So, how's your health? He handed her a cake. Kathy almost cried. What is this? The children were collecting money to buy her a cake. William, come and have tea. The boy looked at her fearfully. It's one thing to be a messenger to hand over a cake, but it's quite another to have tea at the teacher's house. I'm it. No, you come. Sir, we have guests. The hallway came out. Hello, young man. Come in, please. While Kathy was cutting the cake, making tea, William and Clara were in the room when she came in. They were standing in front of a picture of Ethan and Kathy. Slaga turned around. That's Michael's father. Yes, that's my husband. William turned to her confusedly. The school said you didn't have a husband. He immediately slapped his lips. Kathy. She smiled sadly. As you can see, I do. Only he disappeared in the service 25 years ago. William blew the whistle even, and still no news of him. The boy was impressed, and Kathy hurried to say tea is ready. Please everyone to the table. As William walked to the table, his eye came across a more modern photograph. There was Michael in his military uniform. He froze, staring at the photo for a long time. Then he turned back to the table. Oh, my goodness. That's your son. You two look exactly alike. You look exactly alike. At first I thought it was just a processed photo, but I see the shape is different. William said goodbye quickly, wished him a speedy recovery, and ran away. Sarah smiled. It must be nice to be treated like that by students. Of course it is. I didn't expect it myself. Kathy, can you tell me where to go for a job? Am I good to see you off tomorrow? I have to go to the clinic to close my sick leave anyway. Michael hung up. He only got to call home once every 2 weeks, and not because it was too dangerous here. It's just that the only good communication in these parts was by wire. And to get to these very wires, you have to spend 12 o'clock. He was still smiling inwardly, and Liam, with whom they had become very good friends, clapped him on the shoulder. I see you're thinking about home. Liam, you know, I like the service, but it's very depressing without my family. I got married on the eve of my deployment. You can see how I'm drawn to my wife. Liam gloomed at Michael, asked what's wrong with you. I said something wrong. I don't even know. You see, I have my own ideas about family. I got married 3 months before my first trip here. And when I came back after a slight wound, and even at the wrong time, I found my young wife. In the bathhouse, he went dark. Are you implying something? Liam looked at him in surprise. Crazy. I'm just telling you. I'm burned out. That's why I'm sitting here. No one's waiting at home. Michael exhaled. Sorry, bro. It's okay, whatever. For a while they walked in silence through the town, which looked more like a desert village. Then Michael suddenly smiled. You know what, Liam? Let's go to my place after the service is over. Where in the Urals? To the Urals. My sister says she has so many beautiful unmarried nurses. We'll definitely find you that one unique one. I need her. They said it with conviction. Of course you do. How old are you now? 30, 29. But 30's not far off, which means that time will go even faster before you know it. And you'll be 40. And then you'll be on a well-deserved vacation. But no family, no kids, and no one is waiting for you. Liam grinned. You tell beautiful stories. Yes, I can do that. The friends laughed. Come on, think fast, or the ambulances will go home. In the evening, the chief called them to his office. All right, boys, he pulled out a map. Here's the deal. Today our workers went to this village to bring water, to see what needs to be done there. A big family lives there. I don't know how many people, but a lot of them are not very friendly. How did they know the road was going to pass them, though? They seemed to relax a little bit. Anyway, the workers said they saw a man there. Such sharks can't be bothered with the new government. And a lot of people have people like that who are considered slaves. Well, maybe not in the literal sense of the word. That is, they are not whipped or branded. Although I wouldn't be surprised at anything in this country. So this man is obviously Russian, because he understood perfectly well what our guys were saying. And he looks like a Russian, even though his beard is almost knee-high. We should go and check it out. You know, a lot of our people disappeared here back then. People are still out there. Michael said, I know. My father disappeared here. Liam looked at him in surprise. You never said anything about it. Yeah, I haven't had occasion to. Anyway, my colleagues, go tomorrow. Take some guys. Just in case. They left early in the morning. It was a decent ride, hot sandy. They took 5 men with them, and a couple of laborers who would pretend to measure something. Michael didn't sleep well that night. Didn't know why, but he got very agitated. After the evening's conversation, arrived the oldest, estimating how many of them cordially offered tea. And we will not refuse, while people are working with pleasure to sit in the days. Only now the owner considered that from the car unloaded, and the workers immediately relaxed in the bath. He grinned to himself. The cat smells whose meat it has eaten. They entered a spacious courtyard, sat down on carpets under a large awning. The master only snapped his fingers, and two very beautiful, swarthy girls immediately appeared and began to set the table. Liam could not take his eyes off one of them. The host noticed this and frowned. Michael shoved Liam. He seemed to wake up. They began to talk leisurely about the road, about the nature of the cat. When, as it seemed, all topics were exhausted, the one for whom, in fact, they had come appeared. The man was about 50. But that's just a rough guess. He was definitely not a local. The employee asked you cautiously. Yeah, the owner waved his hand. I bought him back about 20 years ago. They'd wanted to kill him. Well, I felt sorry for him, and I could never use a hand. We took him out, nursed him back to health. He was in such bad shape. And then, when peace came, they wanted to let him go because we were animals. But we didn't know where to go. He doesn't remember anything at all. We took pity and kept him. The man dragged a huge tub of waste into the stable. Michael even thought he wouldn't have been able to lift such a vat the first time. And apparently, he's been taking full advantage of it around here. Now, maybe we should show him to the doctors. Remember something. Who needs him now? It's been years. The landlord didn't like the conversation, but Michael decided not to back down. We can talk to him. The landlord wasn't happy, but talk to him. Just keep in mind, I paid money for him. Liam grinned, and he hasn't worked it off yet. The landlord was silent, but Woe didn't go to the man. The man immediately looked at the landlord, but he had to nod. He didn't really want to argue in such a situation. Hello, hello. The man smiled into his beard. It's so rare to hear my native tongue. They sat down with you. You don't remember anything. No one. You're from nowhere. There's nothing. If I remembered, I'd be sitting here. Why didn't you get help? Well, by the time you get to any point, you'll be enslaved 7 times over. You're the ones who had a successful war, and here, no order has changed. How can that be? Let us help you. Is it worth it now? He's not a bad host. I'll come and what? What do I do? Where do I go? I don't even remember the town I lived in. And my wife or girlfriend, of course, is long since married. My parents, if there were any, are probably dead by now. So there's no point in me doing anything. Do you remember having a girlfriend? No, I don't. I still have the picture. Well, part of it. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. I'll wrap it up. I must have gotten hurt. Part of the photo got ruined, but the girl stayed. Here. Michael turned pale. The man held out the photograph to him. It was really hard to see only the girl. A hole shone in the place of the man's head. But Vani couldn't help but recognize her. Exactly the same, only bigger, always stood at his mother's desk. What's the matter with you, boy? He stood up. Are you coming with us? The man looked at him fearfully, then at the master. Standing next to the master were already his 3 sons. Michael raised his gun. Liam stood between him and the family. Easy, easy. Listen, sir, if you believe me, and I can be trusted, I'll send you money for this man tomorrow. Or, if you prefer, something else. I think we can work something out. Liam came closer to the master, and they had a heated discussion. 5 minutes later, he returned. Let's go before he changes his mind. They walked quickly to the car. They tried not to turn their backs. As soon as the village disappeared in the distance, Liam turned sharply to Michael. What the hell? What the hell was that? Do you realize how it could have ended? You're not a boy, but you're acting like one. Why couldn't you inform the authorities and make everything official? Abruptly turned to the rescued and frightened man. Please give me the photograph you showed me. The man uncomplainingly held out the envelope. Michael placed the photo in the palm of his hand. You see? Well, I see it. So what? That this photo is the same one that has always been on my mom's desk all my life. Liam looked at the photo again, then at the man and whistled. So is that how you found your father, by accident or what? The man suddenly closed his eyes and so. Liam. Oh man, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. They stopped the car, but they couldn't bring Ethan back. So he yelled to the driver to drive straight to the hospital. An hour later, a doctor came out to see them. Well, brothers, would you know how much this man has been through? There's no room for him. And you know what's the strangest thing? Not all wounds, or rather, scars have the same statute of limitations. You'll have to heal, of course. But I'd like to talk about memory, in general, with all the equipment we have. We checked his scalp on the head. All the wounds are superficial. I mean, they could have caused memory loss, sure, but it's 1 in 100. It's something else. Most likely, at some point in time, he was in so much pain, so severe, that he blacked out. But not everything is back to work. In such cases, can hypnosis, unconventional treatment, or a strong shock help? As you realize, all of these things need to be double-checked before we can talk about any treatment. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I can pick him up. Yeah, sure. How are you doing with the paperwork? Michael sat in front of the phone for a long time, unable to figure out how to tell his mother. Liam was sitting next to him. Look, maybe I shouldn't tell you, but when you get there, it'll all make sense. Who knows, Liam, what's best? Right now, I don't understand anything myself. Did you talk to him? Yeah. He doesn't remember anything. But at least he looks human now. He shaved off his beard. Liam, what have you decided? I don't know. You've got so much on your plate. Don't make it up. It'll make me feel better. I honestly don't know how to act yet. I've spent my whole life trying to find my father. Once I found him, I was just so confused. My father's mother is my grandmother. Liam raised his eyebrows in surprise. You never said anything about that. What's there to talk about? She kicked my mother out. When she came home from the hospital, she said I was on a bender. No shit. Dad was missing by then. And anyway, the general's wife is living somewhere. But to be honest, there's a lot of summer for everyone. So maybe there's no one left. So, who are all the military men like? Well, my grandfather. I was named after him. All right, time to get ready. And Doe was looking at Cindy unhappily. But how much longer do we have? Another 40 minutes. I told you we'd be here early. God, couldn't you have picked a train so you could change trains right away? The girl smiled calmly. If I could have, I would have. Betty stroked her granddaughter's hand, as if to reassure her, but the girl calmly said, Grandma, it's okay. I knew what I was walking out on. Cindy was Sam's daughter and Betty's granddaughter. Nadeau still insisted that Betty ask her son for help. He didn't refuse, of course, but the granddaughter absolutely refused to let them go alone. I'm coming with you, and that's out of the question. That's the last thing we need. Traveling alone at that age. But you have to study, girl. It's okay. It's not like you need to get away before the session. Now, Cindy watched Adriana's caprices and didn't really understand why a woman in such a mood would go to apologize. But the closer they drove to the place, the quieter Adriana became. She almost stopped talking, swearing, staring out the window and thinking about something. Betty even began to worry about her. Then she couldn't bear to ask. And the daughter was quite ticked off, maybe. You don't need anything. Betty don't just need to think, to remember everything. It's okay. Betty once again thought to herself, that's the way you should be. But then pulled it out of herself at that age to dare to correct the mistakes of 20 years ago. Not everyone does. Already for that you can forgive some of Adriana's sins. Cindy helped Christina down to the platform, and then not. Well, yes, we'll take a cab or take public transportation. It's a pretty decent distance. Adriana, but on public transportation, baby, let those women who don't value themselves at all ride. Cindy smiled. Well, in principle, the decision is the right one. It'll be evening soon. I don't think the buses run that long here. Kathy and Clara were setting the table. They were both nervous, but Kathy was stubbornly nervous. Stabbing. Slaga even had to give her a sedative. Kathy, what's wrong with you? Michael's on his way home with a friend. It's okay though. Yes, I understand, Sarah. But I don't know, I just don't feel good, that's all. I'm the one who should be worried. What if Michael has fallen out of love with me? Kathy laughed. What are you talking about? How could Michael fall out of love with you? You're so beautiful. Kathy knew what she was talking about, was not spoiled by beauty salons and other feminine tricks. She was endowed with natural beauty, but Kathy insisted that Olya changed her hair a little, began to wear heels. At first the girl didn't seem to like it, but now her mother-in-law looked at her with pleasure and compared her with that shy girl Michael had brought. Not a drop of makeup, modest jeans, and a jacket. Naturally, the sneakers that all young people of the country are wearing now. In principle, it's the same Clara, only the hair, a little shorter and a little longer. Light, almost imperceptible makeup, a skirt just above the knee, and now an integral part of a stylish closet high heels. There's a car at the house on the signal. Oh, here we are. Clara suddenly stopped halfway to the door. Kathy laughed. Come on, Clara. Meet Dima too. During the year that Slaga lived with Kathy, they became very good friends. Kathy was not disappointed in her daughter-in-law. On the contrary, the girl reminded her very much of herself when she was young. Clara stood up for the truth, never passed by someone who needed help. So she had a young cat in the house, which the girl, risking her own life, caught on the river in Bologna. Kathy then scolded her so much not for the cat, but because she was very frightened. No cat, even the most beautiful one, is worth your life. What if you'd fallen off if you'd fallen? Would you have thought of that? Michael arrived and you didn't. Slaga smiled and remained silent. Why are you smiling? You know, Kathy, it's so nice when you fight with me. It's been a long time since anyone has been so worried about me. Kathy just flailed her arms. I mean, look at her. I'm trying to tell her that she can't do that. She's like Smith, and she's in the middle of nowhere. In fact, they both realized that swing. Ginger cat, hungry, dirty, and skinned, tied them together even more than the fact that they were now related. 2 weeks. The two of them had nursed him back to health, fed him. And now, the shaggy beauty just couldn't get out of their arms. Clara jumped outside. Kathy followed. She saw her son right away. She saw no one else but Michael, my son, and he kissed his wife soundly, throwing her a surprised look, then grabbed her and her mother in an armful and surrounded her. How have I missed you two? After a few seconds, set them on the ground. Mother Slaga, meet my comrade, this is Liam. Slaga, we have to get him married in 2 weeks. Slaga smiled. So Kathy's life has flooded everyone. Let's go inside. We've already got the table set. Everything's hot. Liam and Michael looked at each other strangely. Mom, here's the thing. There's another person coming with us. Kathy felt her legs weakening. She didn't know what was wrong. Mom, don't worry. I found Dad. Clara and Simeon picked Kathy up from both sides because she started to fall. The woman tried to pull herself together. Mommy doesn't remember anything at all. Michael opened the car door and Ethan got out. He was still thin, but clean-shaven in a suit cut. Ethan. They all heard a long, low scream. Ethan suddenly jerked as from the current he stared at her, then took a step forward. Kathy. She threw herself at him, and Ethan was already shouting across the street, Kathy is mine. Michael watched in amazement, as his father wrapped his arms around his mother and pulled her against him. Liam muttered, "Here comes the stress." You think he remembered everyone? He sure did. Look at him. 10 minutes, if not more. Kathy and Ethan stood there with their arms around each other. No one was in their way. What's 10 minutes compared to the time they hadn't seen each other? Finally, Kathy pulled away. "Ethan, if you only knew how much I've been waiting for you. I didn't believe for a minute that you were dead." "Kathy, if it hadn't been for Michael, he killed his son." "Wow, I have a grown-up military son that you, Kathy, raised alone." Tears ran down Ethan's cheeks. "Why are you here so far from Moscow?" Kathy didn't have time to answer. "Hello, please tell me if Kathy Jackson lives here." A cab car stopped near them, and a beautiful dark-haired girl got out. She was holding a notebook. "Yes." Kathy looked at her in surprise. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Adriana got out of the car. It was obvious that the woman had been napping on the road, and now she was squinting in the sun, trying to get a good look at everyone on the street. Yes, that's exactly who Kathy didn't expect to see here. So many kilometers away from Moscow, Betty got out of the car. Kathy looked at her mother-in-law in silence. "Kathy, I came to see you because I couldn't live with myself. I thought I could die in peace, but I couldn't. I was tormented by conscience and longing. I came here to apologize. I realize that it's not my forgiveness, that such things are not forgiven. But forgive me, I've been very nasty. It only seems that I don't care. I should have fallen at your feet a long time ago. I was so ashamed I wanted to die. And now I realize that the grave sin is not for us." The old woman knelt down. Michael and Kathy rushed to her. They lifted her up. Betty was crying. That's the kind of companion she was. She had certainly never seen one. Cindy, too, was flapping her long eyelashes in surprise. During the journey, she had already gotten used to the fact that the characters, and in general the nature of the old lady was so. Adriana's mother froze. She could already hear Ethan's voice. Tears made it hard to get a good look at her. Not Kathy, not her grandson. "Mommy, hello." And then the woman saw. "Ethan, my son. We had to call an ambulance after all." Adriana, I felt so bad that she fainted, and she immediately said it was real. The doctor made an appointment, said the woman was strong, just overexcited. Everyone forgot about the table. Kathy and Ethan sat by Adriana's bedside, and she kept talking in low voices and holding her hand, Kathy and Ethan at times. Betty dozed quietly on the couch. Michael, Liam, Clara, and Cindy were sitting on a bench in the yard. Liam sighed. "Look, I never thought in my life that I'd be a part of such a family history. In fact, I always thought it could only happen on TV." Cindy smiled. "That's for sure." Michael, his wife, and said, "You know what, Liam? I think I'll take time out and listen here. My wife is a young mom, now a dad and grandma too." Liam gave him a quick glance. "You'll take it up with Mom, of course, but she's already had hers. Is it possible to hold a grudge for so long?" "You're probably right. Here we'll have 2 children at once." "Clara." The woman pressed herself against him harder instead of answering. Liam sighed. "I envy you, brother," with white envy. "I won't have such a scenario." Cindy immediately asked, "Aren't you 2 married?" And they looked at each other. But then Kathy and Ethan came outside. I was amazed at how much my mother had changed, and my father's eyes were shining. "Well, has everybody gone into hiding? We shouldn't have saved so much salt." Everybody to the table. Liam immediately gave his elbow to Cindy. "May I escort you to the table?" Cindy jokingly curtsied and put her hand on Liam's arm. Later, when it was time to put everyone to bed, Liam whispered to Michael, "Something tells me that I won't be in a hurry to sign a new contract this time either." Adriana managed to convince everyone that they would be better off in Moscow. There's plenty of room for everyone. Ethan needs a checkup. Young people need to live. There are more opportunities there. I'll be happy. If you're around every day, I'll ask for forgiveness. Kathy looked at Ethan, at Michael. But it's for the men to decide in any case. In 3 weeks, the whole big company was leaving for Moscow. Kathy was reduced to sobbing. Her students, led by William Smith, came to the station to see her off. They even brought flowers, which made Kathy's tears flow. Liam, too, was traveling with them. Just yesterday, he had made Cindy an offer she could not refuse, namely to marry him. Betty imagined the shocker Sam would be in when he was informed. The train moved. Everyone stared out the window in inertia. Everyone was thinking about something else, but no one else in the company had any sad thoughts. Ethan hugged Kathy. "I told you I'd be back."